remember the days when someone could be wrong. I remember the days when thinking out loud won't get you shot down. I remember the ways we used to call out, hey, hey, hey. So don't forget to call on me to disagree. So don't forget to call on me to disagree. You now reduce them to the evil you once agreed. You now reduce them to be silenced you once agreed. So don't forget to call on me to disagree. So don't forget to call on me, yeah, to disagree. Your ship is sailing on. I see you on the horizon. Your ship is sailing on. I see you sailing on the horizon. Call on me when you wanna disagree. Please call on me when you wanna disagree. You now reduce them to be silenced you once agreed. You and I are predetermined nonsense, and that's okay. You and I have predetermined consequence, and that's okay. And that's okay. You and I are locked into our destiny, and that's okay. Nothing seems to go right. Melodies don't sound right. It's true. Days disappear, shadows remain plainly clear. The door opens, and the fizzing in my beer slows. The door opens as it slows. I see a shade of something moving like a blanket in the wind. A pretty little blanket, perfect to heal me in the end. The door opens, and the fizzing in my beer slows. She walks by, and the spinning in my head grows. The door opens as it slows. I wish that I was pretty, more pretty than reflections look tonight. But I'm past the point of caring. It's time to make a moment. Let's not make a moment. This shouldn't be a moment. The door opens, and the fizzing in my beer slows. She walks by, the spinning in my head grows. When the door opens, and the fizzing in my beer slows. As she walks by, oh, she walks by, the spinning in my head grows. Watch it go. The door opens, and it slows. Lose your mind tonight. Just watch me. Hello, hello. Don't you think about responsibilities. Just feel what you want. Feel what you want tonight. I want you to say how you feel. I want you to tell me I'm no good. We'll send you on your way if you say so. You try to, but you see me staring back at you. I'm staring back at you. To have another dance with me. tear falls down. I want you to say how you feel. I want you to tell me I'm no good. Well, don't you look back, you will miss me. Don't look back, I'm standing under the street light at night. Don't you look back, try to forget. Yeah. So just walk to me, my dear. Look inside me, and it's clear. I'm a better man than him. I'm a better man than him. Then time stops. I want you to say how you feel. I want you to tell me I'm no good. Well, don't you look back, you will miss me. Don't look back, I'm standing under the street light at night. Don't you look back, try to forget. Yeah. So just walk to me, my dear. Look inside me, and it's clear. I'm a better man than him. I'm a better man than him. Then time stops.
All right, my dudes, we are live with another Pangburn Hangout. Today we are talking about morality again with Dal-tsu, and the topic: can math explain morality? Interesting question. Can we quantify morality in that way? Dal-tsu, well, what do you figure?
Well, I think if we can, we're gonna have to do something funky because, like, I think a lot of people have tried to take like a very like an objective stance or a very logical approach to this sort of topic like morality, and obviously it hasn't. If it has worked, it hasn't been demonstrated to work, at least. So
you're talking about the problem of trying to get an ought from an is.
yeah, both trying to get an ought from an is and just trying to get an established goal, I think, is usually the objective. More like, so if you're writing an objective morality, I would think getting a goal down that we all have would be the first.
Yeah, and I think
way to try.
And I think if we can clear this up to begin with, to avoid going down a rabbit hole of trying to get people to demonstrate whether there is an objective moral standard to be discovered. Is there a way that we can work this conversation so we don't go down that hole again?
Yeah, I think we would have to just agree to abstain from that, because there's, like, if we do point that out, we'd have to acknowledge, like, yeah, okay, we won't be able to prove this without just trying every moral system to see which consequentially works out best, or something like that. So we'd have to agree to quibble about the details and try to pick the best one without knowing for sure which might be the best one. If we're essentially, I want today to be about attempting to build a good moral foundation.
Cool. Right on. I'm excited. I'll shut up now.
I don't have access to who's here, so if anyone else wants to chime in, just so I know.
Well, I'm here, Dal-tsu. Don speaking.
Hey, Don Don.
How you doing, my friend? So I was actually
Pretty
very
good.
intrigued by the topic because I think that was actually one of the things Immanuel Kant tried to do was not necessarily ground his morals in math, like proper, like 1 + 2 = 3, but rather in like the underlying metaphysics of math, right? So he would call it, I think in his book on the grounding of metaphysics of morals, he was really afraid of society becoming secularized. And he thought that society needed something to like ground their morals or else they were going to degenerate. And one of the interesting formulations he tried to do, which caveat I think doesn't work, is what he called the categorical imperative. Do you mind if I just read it real quick? Let me Google it and read it.
For it.
Okay, so the categorical imperative.
I just wanted to say quickly, guys, please engage in the text chat on YouTube. We are live at the Pangburn Offensive, which is the new live stream YouTube channel for Pangburn. So head over there, make sure you're subscribed, hit the like button on the video, and please engage in the text chat there as opposed to live texting here on Discord if you can.
So Kant has a few formulations. I'll just read through them and then explain how I learned them and understand them. So the first one would be act only according to that maxim, through which you can at the same time will that it become a universal law. Act that you use humanity in your own person as well as any person of any other, always the same time as an end and never merely as a means. Every rational being must act as if he were, through his maxim, always a law-making member in the universal kingdom of ends. The last two are a little more vague. So the first one is the one that most people use, which is act accordingly to a maxim through which at the same time that maxim will become a universal law. And a good way to conceptualize it is he's trying to use the law of non-contradiction. So anything that becomes contradictory between these two opposing maxims could not be moral. So one of a famous formulation is like of cheating on a test or cheating in general. So if I cheat on a test, it's possible because there are rules. But if everyone cheats on the test, then it's no longer cheating since universally, if it's a law, it's allowed now. So there's a contradiction. If it's universal, it's impossible to cheat. But if it's individual, it's possible to cheat. And therefore, he would say that cheating is not moral. And that's how he tried to ground morals in this type of like logic game. And I think that he tried to do it in like a mathematical way.
That is pretty interesting. Like trying to think of other situations that might apply or break down.
Yeah, so the ones that are classically used by, let's use Stefan Molyneux for example, that he's got his universal secular ethics book that he wrote. Murder, theft, and rape. Rape, theft, assault, and murder are the four that he says. So if you wanted to murder and you applied that universally, then everyone has to want to be murdered and murdered at the same time, and so that's a contradiction, and so it can't be moral.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I ask a question with that?
The same thing works with rape, theft, assault, murder. Yeah, you can. Sure.
So a good question on that is sort of voting on sort of healthcare or education. So you could say like denying somebody healthcare or education isn't moral because you don't want that for yourself. Sort of a contradiction, isn't it?
No. I think the way you would have to formulate that would be that the thing that's immoral the thing that's moral would be to give somebody healthcare. So you would want everyone to give everyone healthcare?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So to to deny somebody healthcare or education would be immoral?
You would have to suppose that everybody universally should want to give other people healthcare at all times.
Well, if they want it for themselves, and I would say they do. I don't know.
I don't know. I think that like some of the things are it's a contradiction to universalize it. So you
Yeah.
can the categorical imperative argument, I guess, is what Dandan's saying, is that if you make it if you take something that you say is moral and universalize it and it creates a contradiction, then that means it's not moral. It can't be moral if it creates a contradiction. But it doesn't necessarily, where it fails is it doesn't necessarily go the other way to say that just because it doesn't make a contradiction means that it is moral.
Correct. This is true of the formulation. The formulation is not telling us what to do; it's telling us what is immoral, and that's like a test for it.
Yeah.
Think about cheating on a test. You take an action, apply it universally, see if it's possible. If it still is, then it's not immoral. It doesn't mean we should do it, right?
When you mentioned Immanuel Kant, because I watched this video recently, it made me think of it. It's from Dark Matter 2525, God's greatest argument of all time. And Yahweh like creates this super theist apologist, and he by raising up the dead ones, like he's like, rise, Saint Thomas Aquinas, and rise, like all these other dead apologists, because he's like, I'm going to prove to the world that I exist. And the little angel's telling Yahweh, like, well, why don't you just like reveal yourself, God? And he's like, no, this will be better. But yeah, it just made me think, like, rise, Immanuel Kant, or however you say. But
Well, I guess he was an apologist. He was pretty racist too in some of his like anthropological works.
no, but I just mean like what was clear was like we have a lot more science and knowledge, I think, nowadays, and it's tempting to go back to the great giants because we do stand on their shoulders, but I mean, it's a great foundation, but it just made me think of that short little video, which I recommend people watching because it's pretty funny. Again, Dark Matter 2525, he has a YouTube channel, and he puts out a lot of good stuff about morality and things that are related to this topic.
I think I have a potential bee in the bonnet of secular morality.
Of
Be in the
all
bonnet.
secular morality.
So give us bees in the bonnet, but keep it on topic. Keep it on topic.
Yeah,
So
Earlier,
earlier,
at least. Yeah, go ahead.
earlier it was talked about that it can't be moral. Like something can't be moral if it contradicts. But that in and of itself seems to be coming from the assumption that logic is worth something. How can we know that?
Can I respond to that?
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
More
Never.
to reason in issue with deeper understanding. That you can rationalize in a logical way can be more moral, because what you thought was bad, when you get more you come to a different change of view and realizing you were mistaken in viewing something that was bad that was actually good by implementing logic.
Sorry, Nevik, when you jumped in there, it also made me think of that video because Yahweh says, William Lane Craig, rise! And
Oh my goodness.
it's like,
He also-
William Lane Craig's not dead yet. And then like Yahweh has lightning like strike him, and then he dies, and then he says it again. He's like, rise!
I
So,
think
like,
he's
Nivik jumped in.
brain dead. I think he might be brain dead.
But I was just thinking, like, Nivik rise. And it's like,
Yeah, freaking. I think I just watched that movie a little while ago, and they made like a god-proving chimera of like dead ancient people. Yeah.
When I do want to sort of dig into the point that I think Andy was trying to make. I think he was going the route of saying, well, if logic has to mean something, so therefore our understanding of logic has to come from something that intended it. And I think basically what he's trying to get to is this idea of like God had to have set these things in particular order for them to be where they are right now. Is that correct, Andy?
Well, I mean, that's my own perspective, but I'm curious how you guys,
Yep.
if
So
you're operating from a secular understanding, I'm curious how you can
here's
justify.
here's a secular understanding. I want to know if you agree with these three axioms. And an axiom is something we just have to take as being true. We can't ever prove it. But these three axioms is that the universe exists. We exist in the universe, and we have a way to interact with the universe, right?
Okay,
Do you agree with those three axioms?
of course.
So I think the only axiom that you're adding to that is that God did it. So anything that's secular can be understood with just those three axioms. But once you bring in religion to it, you're adding a fourth axiom that says that God did it.
Yeah, and in my opinion, that muddies the waters.
Okay, but I'm not really
I
trying.
think I can address the logic issue a little bit for you.
Yeah, I'm not really trying to make
so
the
the
case
language
for-
of so I think I can address the logic issue a little bit for you. The language of logic is something that we do with words that mimic the physiochemical structures of our brain. And if you want to communicate as a human with a brain that functions with another human with a brain that functions, and you want to give them the same experience in their brain that you have in your brain, using the language of logic is something that can accomplish that.
But what if somebody doesn't want to do that? Why are they wrong?
Then what we're talking about when we're talking about morality is people with functioning brains talking to other people that have functioning brains.
Yeah,
Yes,
the
but
laws
what if
of
someone?
If they don't want to communicate with another person, or if their brain is broken, then all bets are off.
yeah, the laws of logic are basically the law of identity, which means that A is A, the apple is an apple. And then you have the law of non-contradiction, which is just that apple can't also be an orange. It's either an orange or an apple. And then the law of excluded middle, which just says that it must be one of those things. It either has to be this or that, or it has to be something. It can't just be some mix of all things or anything like that. And those are like the basic laws of logic that
concepts
we
of and or, exclusive or, neither.
It's
Associations.
Yes, and without those you can't communicate. Like if every time I say the word apple I mean something different, if I've given up the law of identity and I have no way to communicate that to you, then like we can't have a conversation because you're over there talking about whatever, missiles and rainbows and unicorns, while we're all like, but this tree's right here though, and you're like, no, the tree can fly, and you're just talking about whatever. And so that's pretty much the trap of the laws of logic, is you can't communicate ideas without them.
Yeah, logic is like the atoms of all thought and action, as far as I can see, from human beings, conscious action, as far as I can see. There's no way of getting around it if you want to have a intelligible conversation.
Right, and if our brains weren't neural networks, we would have something else that we wouldn't that would be different from logic to communicate with one another.
Telepathy.
if we didn't have eyes and ears and hands feeding our neural network in our brain, we would have different ways of talking about things. And if we didn't have a neural network that has the processes that it has, we would have a completely different logic structure that works for what our brain structure is.
Yeah.
Like I want to argue. I want to argue specifically against the law of non-contradiction, because I tend to think that that's the one that gets us into trouble in some logical spaces, particularly something like morality, because there's like the space of like logical axioms don't even have to be upheld in moral agents. So it's like if a moral agent can contradict themselves, then why are you still trying to make a logical map of morality with the laws of logic if
Right.
it's just obvious from the get-go that nothing has to adhere to those laws?
Yeah, I mean the best example I could think of, it's illegal to murder people. A guy kills people, goes to trial. What do? They sentence him to death. I mean, this is a contradiction. People live with it every day. It's a contentious subject, but it's worth being pointed out. About the mathematical question of morality, that's an interesting thing. I mean, I don't know dog crap about math or anything, but it seems to me that if you wanted to pick a discipline in math, statistics might be the best way to approach morality. It could give you, statistics is very good at giving you an overview of people's opinions of how things function, probabilities and so forth. So yeah, as far as the main subject, and then also I just want to say, I really, I mean, I haven't looked into Hume too much, but I just think it's terribly unfortunate that we take that the ought is paradigm or dynamic as just written in stone. I just think it's absolutely silly, and I'll just say this: I was thinking about it the other day, and I'll say this: I think you can get an ought from an is, but as long as you add an if, right? All you got to do is add an if. So you ought to get a vaccine if you want to be healthy, and and vaccines are the best way or is the best way to protect you from a certain thing. Then you ought to get it. Then you
That
ought to get it.
actually,
That's not.
Hume did take that into account. If you dig into his philosophy, he did take that into account.
Yeah, and
Well,
that
wait,
phrase,
how is that morality?
he often used things in very like tongue in cheek fashion. Like when he said that, I don't think he thought, "Oh, this is a principle written in stone for morality for the next 5 centuries." I think it was a tongue in cheek line that, I mean, he thought through pretty decently. But I think very firmly, if you cannot determine what you ought to do from what everything that there is, then what can you possibly use to determine what to do?
Wait,
I
but
have a
how?
question.
Wait,
I have,
I'm sorry. Can I ask a
Alright,
question?
hold on.
That is true. So like depending on how you look at it, but like if it is the case that people keep drinking water out of this well and dying, we ought not do it, right?
Yeah,
So this is there are situations where that's the case, but what the ought versus is problem is not relating to like necessarily survival techniques or like what it's like to actually exist. It was more along the lines of philosophical problems of you can't make moral judgments of saying the world the world morally ought to be this way because of the way things are at this particular time. That was the position he was taking.
Yeah,
My
basically, you could say that. Hold on, someone's trying to get in. I should let them get in first.
Yeah, I just had a question. So I think the example that was given, if you want to be happy and vaccines are the way to be happy, then you ought to get the vaccine, right? I think was that the example?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what if you don't want to be happy? Should you still ought to get the vaccine?
Yeah.
Well, that's the if. If you want to be healthy, If you
So-
don't want to be healthy, then
so,
don't get it.
yeah.
Can I ask
So-
a question? So wouldn't the
so the
morality
problem-
be the if?
Yeah, so the problem is, like, let's for example say that like everyone wants babies not to be killed. So if we want babies not to be killed, right, then we set up laws that prevent babies from being killed, right? But
Yeah.
then how would you apply that to, for example, to make a judgment of someone who says, I don't want babies not to be killed, so therefore I do not ought to adhere to these laws of that everyone
That's
else
what we
sets up
call.
for me.
Well, that's what we call immorality.
Yeah, but
I
how
would
would we,
say I would just say
how would we apply the ought statement to that person as well? Because they
I
don't
feel like
adhere.
there's another assumed value. I mean, it's not just when we try to base our morals entirely off of logic or the situation. Not only is there an assumption there that any of that matters, but there's
actually-
there's an
Why are you
assumption that
concerning-
consensus and agreement matters.
Why
I mean,
are you
why-
concerning
why-
yourself
why
with
should it-
morals? I told you
I
not
should
to
clear
eat
that up,
shellfish
actually.
and don't wear mixed fabrics. Okay, that's like why concern yourself with morals? Just don't eat shellfish and don't wear mixed fabrics.
I think
So-
what we should be going about doing here is
So if I
To
have
clarify-
denim pants, I have to have a denim
Hold
jacket.
hold on, guys. Dal's running the show. Dal was like trying to make a point.
I'm just thinking what we should be trying to do here is find an ought that works here, because if we can't get an ought from an is, we got to be able to get an ought from somewhere. We have all these oughts. Like
Exactly.
everyone's
Well,
running
okay,
around
well-
with an ought.
exactly.
I think
All right,
every
I'm gonna bring it back to math for you guys. Says nobody's talking about math, and Dal wanted to talk
Yeah.
about math. I have an idea that involves math. This actually involves math. I'm gonna try it on you, and I think it goes from math to music. And when you think about the music example, and I want to let someone else come up with a music example, then you can actually kind of feel that the morality is going to work. Okay, but the math is not going to make sense in a moral framework, but it's going to get you started on getting it to music. And then when you think about music, then you can think about well-being from the music. But first we have to think about the math. Okay,
Yep, go.
This is interesting. Go for it.
in math, we have things called wave functions. Okay, is everybody familiar with what a wave function is? Like sine or cosine, or it's something it's an oscillator. Okay, it goes up and down. Sometimes there's a force transmitted through the wave function. Most often, that's what we use wave functions to model is forces being transmitted through some sort of a medium, or energy being transmitted through some sort of a medium. And when you have two waves, and they align out of phase, then the waves have something happens called destructive interference, which is the energy from both of the waves fight against each other and negate each other, and the energy is not transferred. And there's another phenomenon called constructive interference, where if the two waves are in phase, then instead of destroying each other, they add to each other, and more energy is transferred. Or all. So, like for example, if the waves are coming from different directions, like standing waves on a pool, you could have two waves that are 1 meter high on an ocean, that are two big ripples that are coming towards each other. And if they're in phase, then the ripple will turn into 2 meters high at the point where they interact. If they're out of phase, it'll be flat. If they're perfectly out of phase, they'll be flat. And if they're something different if they're just a little bit out of phase, there will be all kinds of chaos where they come together, but it will eventually, the friction will make everything eventually grind to a halt, and the energy will not get through. But if the waves are in phase, then there will be a place where there's constructive interference, and the waves are amplified by each other. And then when they pass, then the energy just passes right through as if the other wave wasn't there. So both waves, if they're in phase, are essentially unabated by the other wave, but there's a place where they're even stronger than they were when they were alone. And this is a mathematical phenomenon in wave functions. And if you think about it in music, if you have two instruments that are playing together, or let's go with a simpler explanation. If you have a
two strings on a guitar.
two strings on a guitar, or or a guitar and another guitar on the wall. If you have two strings on the guitar that are in tune with each other, that are perfectly tuned, and you pluck one of them, then the other one will vibrate with some kind of harmonic resonance from the vibration of the other one. Am I right, Lebowski? Am I explaining this right?
Yep, that's very true.
If I go into a guitar store and all the guitars on the wall are perfectly tuned, and I go and I hit my note perfectly, all the other guitars will vibrate with harmonic resonance.
Yep,
that wave will travel through the air
frequency,
and it will make everything else around it pick it up, and then everything else around it will start vibrating with the same frequency that first guitar was drummed with.
Well, not the same frequency. Not everything else. Like that's
everything every string that's tuned to that.
That's tuned to it. Yeah, exactly. So that's the interesting thing with like recording studios. There's been cases where like recording studio wasn't like made properly, so all of a sudden you had a resonant frequency at like 55 hertz. And all of a sudden, you couldn't record in that studio anymore
because everything would like screech at you or something.
Exactly,
from the electricity. So there's something else that's really interesting. If you've ever been to a rock concert or a classical music concert or symphony orchestra, when the orchestra plays properly, and I'm saying properly on purpose here, when the orchestra plays properly, when every player in the orchestra plays properly, they're not necessarily playing like that's why this is one of the reasons why violins don't have frets on them, because if everybody's a little bit out of tune, as long as everyone's a little bit out of tune together, then you get this harmonic resonance of all of the instruments playing together and there's not just it doesn't sound the same as each individual instrument added together. It sounds like there's a greater sound that comes out that
there's an emergent
property of the orchestra playing together in tune. And if one of those violin players plays out of tune, it ruins the whole thing. It doesn't completely ruin it, but the more people you have out of tune, the more ruined it gets. And if all the violin players were playing their own song, it would sound like a bunch of garbage, right? But so in music, everyone's playing the same song. They're playing in time. They're playing in tune with each other. And then when you put a bunch of instruments together like that, you get this great experience where you have an orchestra. And furthermore yet, if you have a building that the orchestra is in tune with, that building will create its own harmonics, and it's louder. There's other frequencies that resonate.
Yeah, you get the natural reverberation.
The natural reverberation of the building. Like I've been in rock concerts where the music was not suited for the venue, and it just sounds like garbage. And then you know that it's a good band and it's good music, and you go to this venue that it's not suited for, and just the way the drums reverberate off the back wall, and it's coming back to you out of sync.
Well, there also is the notion, Doctor, if like there are bad mix guys in the board at some,
Sure, but we're talking about the mathematics here. But we're talking about we're not talking about just a bad guy. So we're talking about the mathematics here. So the mathematics of harmony is that's a real thing, right? You can't deny that when two instruments are playing together, it sounds different than one instrument, especially if you've heard it done really well, and if the music is composed right.
Well, it also is extremely fuzzy because the way orchestras tune, So like people on the low end will actually tune a little bit flat. People on the high end will tune high. They'll
Okay.
tune
Sure.
up. So and it's just like, and it actually like allows for to like feel like it's expanding between the lower and the higher.
Really?
Same
Okay.
with like in any piano, if it's tuned properly, the lower notes. So if you play like low C or like C1 compared to C3, it's going to actually be detuned slightly.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
but if you play C5, it's going to be tuned up. So one of
Right.
C5 will be sharp, C1 will be flat. And there's a
So why
reason
is
for
that? Why is that?
yeah, I think that has to do with the way the mind works. Like you're,
Forgive me for
I
interrupting.
mean, so that
Well,
does lead
yeah,
exactly into talking about morality, right?
yeah. One the reason that's why I say it's the way the mind works is because you can get like a what's called an equal tune on a
Okay.
piano, but when you play it, it sounds weird. But when you
well,
get
and
like an actual,
but
It's called equal temperament. I just want to
yeah,
weigh in real quick. It's
oh
called
yeah,
equal temperament,
equal temperament.
yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right.
but
Yeah,
that's pretty rare in piano.
Yeah,
And if you want to look it up and dig
yeah,
into it, it's called equal temperament.
Yeah,
yeah.
and so and one thing about equal temperament is that and I don't know why this is, but on a keyboard with equal temperament, you can't play all of the keys. It's like if you go from C to like E, it doesn't work because something about the
Oh,
like
yeah.
because when people started tuning like harpsichords and clavichords, they assumed that having a perfectly equal spacing between all of the tensions of the strings would produce the best mathematical relationships. But you actually have to change the increment as you go the the keyboard because something about the mathematical relationships causes the keyboard to go out of tune. And so you can only play in certain keys on an equal
Yeah,
temperament keyboard.
yeah, which
Actually,
leads to
I
the
think
conclusion that like large amounts of perfection and striving for perfection
Yeah.
through mathematical reasoning doesn't necessarily lead to harmonious interactions.
Right,
okay,
but then
I'm a
but
little
then
I'm
bit
not
I
lost
sure.
here.
I'm not sure
Yeah,
the
I think we need to get Dr. Doolittle in here to
yeah,
relate us
yes,
back to
I
morality.
agree. I
Yeah,
agree.
So
I
how do you
thought
get from?
he was making it pretty
I
well.
haven't really
I
been
followed.
seeing how this
Yeah.
ties
Yeah,
into
So
morality.
I like the metaphor,
so
but I think we need to tie the bow on.
as a meta as
Yeah,
a
yeah,
as a
yeah.
metaphor,
Tie the bow. Yeah.
as a metaphor, the way that one ought to act if you hold certain truths that life is better than death and health is better than sickness and more life is, and as Dal has said, more life is therefore good and more ideas are therefore good, is you want the waves of your action, the waves of action that result from your actions, the energy that you transmit through the world, the positive the impacts of your actions
Yeah.
to constructively interfere with the actions of the people around you rather than destructively interfere with them. So if you're acting in harmony with the people around you, in concert with them, then you can do more good than if the two people were acting alone. And
well,
if you're acting discordantly with the people around you, destructively with the people around you, or degeneratively, which is in mathematics is a term where when two wave functions meet and they zero each other out, if you act degenerately, then you cancel out the efforts of the people around you. So someone else is trying to do good and you do something out of phase, and then it cancels out their good efforts or destroys their good efforts.
well,
But with
could I ask
I
a
don't
question?
see how that's
So
Yeah,
Can I
but
ask?
with
Wait,
morality, like they're like both sides could think they're doing good efforts.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a
Yeah.
question?
Right, but so the right thing to do necessarily requires the some at least some amount of coordination between the actors that are involved in the equation you're talking about on the level that you're analyzing. If you have one person that wants something and the other person that wants to not have it, then all the efforts of the person that want to make that thing are going against the efforts of the person who wants to not have that thing be made.
Yes.
Can you help me?
So
But why
yeah.
should they feel any
Hold
obligation to coordinate?
I'm sorry.
Hold on. I would make a quick point to that though. That did have to do with the fact that if people are working together, they can have a greater impact. I thought we were like
Yeah.
wrapping up a morality bow on the idea of the mathematics of wave functions, and then we talked about how wave functions interact on a musical scale, and we can understand that subjectively, and it has like an emotional impact. I thought that's where we were wrapping up, is where that turns into a moral proclamation.
I'm kind of
sorry.
lost.
I'm a little bit confused. So, who gave the explanation for that? I'm sorry. Who is
Doolittle?
It was Doolittle.
Yeah. So, I think you've lost me here because I'm just like a question. I'm not really seeing how that really gets you to where you need to be. I'll give an example.
To where I need to be?
To where
Or
you need to be to make
doesn't get you to where you need to be.
Well, yeah,
maybe
to
across
get
the is-ought gap, I think is what
I'll
he
give an
means.
example. I'll give an example. This is, you probably heard this example before. So you're in a hospital, right? This is just a very specific example of and I'm failing to see the application that could apply here. For example, so in this example, you're in a hospital, right? I'm sure you heard it before. And so there's in the room opposite your room. There's a comatose woman, right? She's in a coma, and she's going to wake up from the coma later, but she's comatose for now, and there's no one else watching in the hospital, right? So you go in.
I'm in the hospital too.
Yes, you go in and you rape her, and then you leave
Why would
the
I do
room,
that?
right? Well, you just say you assume you do. Let's just assume. Okay, somebody else does it. You don't do it. Somebody else does it.
It's
Okay.
a little better.
So somebody goes in and rapes her, and he leaves, and leaves no evidence, right? And so later, this woman wakes up, and everyone and life just goes on for her as normal because there's no evidence, and she has no idea that this ever happened. And also, the person who did rape her had got an immense amount of, let's say, pleasure from doing so. I don't see how a theory of harmony in music would necessarily make that action unjustified if it increased the overall well-being of people who are alive. I don't like it. Like
Would it
the
increase
specific harm done in that.
it increased the well-being, like even in your argument right there, you're saying it increased the well-being of one person over the well-being of another person. And then you also have to look at like, it did. You
Well,
said
so
like,
it didn't hurt the other person, I think
It
is
didn't
what
hurt.
he's trying to
It
say.
didn't hurt the woman.
He's trying to come up with a scenario where it's disgusting to you,
yes,
but
we all
it
find
didn't
it
actually
disgusting.
hurt. It didn't actually hurt the victim.
Like what harm was done? Because like who was harmed?
The harm was done by the person who was doing the act. The person who was doing the act harmed himself by creating an environment in his own head where he can do such things.
Okay, so he wipes his memory. Did he still do something wrong?
I'll answer it.
You're talking about
total.
somebody who raped somebody, right? I thought you said.
Yeah. Well, he raped somebody that was comatose.
Yeah, and she wakes up and there's no evidence, so she never knows that it actually happened.
It doesn't matter if that person knows. You're still transgressing on another individual.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
There's no way to
see what
that.
Okay.
Let me
There's no way to
man
escape
his
that
point.
moral imperative.
Let's get Richard in here.
His point.
I'm sorry. I'm a little out of my depth here, so maybe I'm not understanding your response.
It's a little bit of a wild. I mean, a wild type. I mean, we're trying. I'm trying to make an analogy that you can use to
Yeah.
try to understand that if what you do as an action in the real world makes other people's positive actions less effective, then what you're doing is immoral. And if it does nothing, to affect them one way or another, then it's probably amoral. And if it acts harmoniously and creates good things that are greater than the sum of the two parts that are acting together, then it's probably moral. And so if you go around looking for ways to amplify the good efforts of the people around you and to amplify their well-being without damaging anything in the process, for example, or without zeroing out the waves that someone else is trying to do at the same time, then you're probably gonna end up making the world a better place and making more positive action as a result of your actions. And if your actions are the opposite, if your actions are interfering with the ability of people to coordinate with one another, if your actions are destroying things that people built, if your actions are down regulating autopoiesis to the point where homeostasis is no longer possible in your society, then that's immoral.
So let me take
I'm
a
still
stab
not.
at that.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry. I'm still confused.
It's an
let's-
analogy to me. It's an analogy to me.
Yeah, so
I'm
here,
still
let me
You're
confused.
trying to do like some
Well-
ridiculous hypothetical
it's
situation.
not, it's not
let's hold on, because
not ridiculous.
Dr. Doolittle, I do think
Talk.
that
Uh-huh.
think that I have a way out of this just because your music analogy kind of went in line with my thing. But
Let's hear Dal. But I was trying to tie math into morality, which is really hard to do, by the way.
yeah, but before I do,
I
I want to hear from Richard, and I think Andy was trying to get in there.
Yeah. Next.
Rich, please. Yeah.
And so I don't think Doolittle's analogy is ridiculous, nor do I think Damascus's analogy is ridiculous. I think both are helpful. So I'm going to start
Invisible
with
hospital rapists.
We got a one at a time, please.
Well,
Thanks.
he's on to something because I'll try and tie it together. I might not get to Damascus, but so there's a distinction that I think is not well defined in your analogy, Doodle. Because I would agree with you that the harmony which emerges out of the symphony can be categorized as orderly. But then you made the jump that was positive. Now, if you want to make it a moral axiom that order is positive, you can do that. And I think that was the implicit assumption that you were making. And you even elaborated on this more by saying that when a person is obstructing the people who are building something, that is immoral behavior. And
Right.
so
That's literally the definition of immoral behavior.
And so
Wait,
I disagree with you. I disagree with you. And here's why. I think you only have half the picture. So let me get into this through music, and then I'll go to morality like you did. So this is a discussion in music circles is how do you judge bad music? So let's take a Mahler symphony, which is a very romantic, resonant, and very harmonious symphony. And then let's take a Schoenberg symphony, which is very discordant and messy and not conducive to that emergent harmoniousness that is characteristic of Mahler. Now, what are you going to use to judge which is good and which is bad? All I can say is that one is more orderly and one is more
Yeah.
and
No, I
chaotic.
get you, and I have an easy answer for that.
Yeah, well, well,
Yeah. So I have an easy
yeah,
answer for that. Morality
well,
doesn't answer the question of whether the
do it,
symphony. Yeah, I'm
do
giving
it.
you the easy answer.
Okay,
The
go
easy
ahead.
answer. It's a really easy answer because morality does not judge the symphony or the composer. Morality judges the morality. The question of morality is how should an individual player play?
Right. Okay. So let me get there because
But why should the individual adhere to?
hold on, Damascus, because
Yeah, sure. My bad.
I also disagree with his characterization of moral behavior as building up and immoral behavior as breaking down. Because let's say that you have an autopoietic system, I think that you can describe.
Let's say you have it.
Yeah.
I mean, we live in the real world. We have it.
Yes. Sorry.
Okay. Let's grant that we live in the real world.
Sometimes you have to accept people's hypotheticals and thought experiments to,
Sure,
engage
no,
in philosophy.
I accept the thought experiment.
It's alright. And I also think that you can describe civilizations as autopoietic, so I'm going to take an autopoietic civilization. And let's say it is something akin to the Soviet Union or Maoist China or Nazi Germany, right? Nazi Germany was an autopoietic civilization that was organizing to build up structures to accomplish certain goals. Now, what the Allies did was they obstructed that behavior of building up a system. So were the Allies being immoral by obstructing the building up of a system? Because I think the mistake you're making by saying that moral behavior is only building up is that you're missing half the picture. Morality is a back and forth between life and death, between building and destruction. And because I'm a Petersonian, between chaos and order. This is where I get this argument. You need both for moral behavior.
So you're saying we need people to be disresonant with our orchestra because without that we wouldn't know what is resonant, basically.
Well, I think it's because human beings aren't necessarily always satisfied by order, and you can Peterson cites Dostoevsky for this. You can give men cakes, and all they do is pleasure themselves, and they will destroy the whole thing out of spite. That's how human beings work.
So you're saying
The dog
you
in
need
the manger.
destruction, you need disorder and order, is what you said? Is what?
Yeah, and the reason why is because being on the border of them is what makes life engaging. Because the reason why Schoenberg did what he did was because he was dissatisfied with the order of the romantic music. And that's
Hey,
why.
Richard, can I ask you a question real quick?
Yeah.
You would you say that you don't necessarily hold to the law of non-contradiction? You're saying that things aren't necessarily like something bad could be considered just like ungood, or something good could be considered like less bad, and so on and so forth.
I mean, I think I would, but I don't see how the argument I just laid out necessarily defies the law of non-contradiction. I'm not seeing the connection.
So when you know you need order and disorder, how do you know when you need order?
Let me finish with GMO a minute.
Well, you were just saying, you were saying, I think it's a very great point that you made, like, us dropping the atom bomb on Japan. That was not an orderly act at all. But many people consider it a moral act because they do the counterfactual historical account, and we could have invaded or they could have invaded us, et cetera, et cetera. What I'm saying is it's not always you're saying it's not always a binary between order is this, order is good, chaos is bad. I mean, I might be using the law of non-contradiction in an incorrect or contradictory way, and but I was just
so
getting to
I
that.
want to challenge.
Can I answer the
quickly.
Nazi? Can I answer the Nazi analogy before we
and
move on?
Me
then we'll
too.
get Nivik in here because I know Nivik wants
Yeah.
to.
So the Nazi analogy is interesting, and I've actually thought of this on multiple levels, and I've written about it a couple times in the morality tab. So I'll try to address it kind of quickly.
All right.
Okay. So when you're analyzing whether something is moral, there's a certain level that you're analyzing it. Okay, so when you're talking about was it moral for one group of people to do something to another group of people, the universe of moral agents that those people have a contract with, that they're beholden to, are the people that are around them, and there are other groups of moral agents that might be acting on a different set of rules. For example, if we have just to go back to the music analogy, if we have a concert going on and the violin section starts playing another song, and the conductor says, "Get those guys out of here," and security comes and gets them out of here through violent means. The concert is better without the violins that happen to be there playing a different song. Now, the people that were playing the violins, they might have thought they were playing the right song, and then then the people in the trumpet section might have been like, "Oh, those guys are playing the wrong song over there," right? And the guys with the trombones, they actually got the violin guys out of there. But then at the end of the day, the concert goes on and everyone's playing the same song again, right? So sometimes there's groups of people that think they're acting morally amongst themselves because the people that are in their universe are the ones that they're in harmony with, but they're out of harmony with the rest of the world.
Yeah,
right?
I just want to chime in that it sounds like
the Nazis were out of harmony with the rest of the world with their expansion and invasion of Europe, and it wasn't.
But that's not why the Nazis were immoral. It's because they were
killing
people.
Well, the whole aggressive. Well, I think they were immoral because of the aggressive war and the genocide was a side issue, but that's immoral too.
But the point
for
I'm trying to make
example,
is there could be people who have incongruent ideas that aren't necessarily immoral, right?
So it depends on what level you analyze it. It depends on what level you analyze it on. So if the whole world is not in harmony because there's, let's just say, five different groups of people with incongruent ideas that are at war with one another, then what one ought to do to be what the proper action is for one of those groups to take out the other groups, and then that improves the harmony of the whole world. Right. So if you're analyzing it on a global scale, then sometimes war and the elimination of something that's discordant in the whole world might be the thing that it takes to get the whole world acting in harmony. And so there's a temporary addition of chaos, but I would argue that that's a good thing if in the end, it turns into more order.
Well, I really truly did believe the only thing you need to do is buy the whole world of Coke. I mean, that's what
I think this is the great point. The great point of
1970.
This is the great point that you made with the director of the orchestra calling the shots, as though there actually needs to be some sort of moral arbiter at the head of all things that is required for those to have some sort of measure, some sort of standard.
Can I ask a question?
But you do believe, Bruce, you do believe that, but you just believe God's the conductor, right? So you would say no man can be the conductor. It's only God that can be the conductor.
Ultimately, yes.
Yeah.
God's will is played, but man tends to take that position from time to time.
Doolittle.
Can I
Yeah.
respond?
I'm sorry.
Sure, yeah.
Could
Yeah.
I ask?
Yeah, I'll listen for a bit.
Yeah, we'll
Should
go
I-
Nivik then Damascus, because
Okay.
Nivik was wanting to get in before Damascus.
Yep.
I get where he's coming from in like Dead Reckoning. It's kind of like if you start with a number, it could have bad negative cascading effects throughout the rest of your calculation, and where I'm kind of seeing where Doctor is coming from. But what Richard was saying with order and disorder, like it's kind of like learn the yeah, I get there with the disorder where you learn the hard way, you know. But if anybody explains something in a logical order in outcome, in order to avoid that potential, you know, that's the discussion that's being. It's if an order, a rational order, was brought, you know, for people to follow of certain facts, you know, to rationalize logically, you know, to go about things in a rational way that is positive, because the more you have an understanding and knowledge in rationalizing, you know, and having a deeper understanding, you can therefore more likely have a potential approach in addressing things in a positive way and outcome, you know. So yeah, I get where he's coming from. So like I when Richard was saying like the order and disorder, I'm like that's a discussion. We're arguing.
Yep.
If you have, you know, if you have a reasonable explanation of how to go about things in a positive way, then you go about doing that, because you could, you know, with proper information, within society can build itself on that. If you have you know, if you start from a false premise, kind of like what the doctor is talking about, then it's called dead reckoning. That means every move that you make through from that point on would be a false move, because your premise is a false premise that you started from.
Yeah, so yeah,
That
you're pretty
was
much saying that if we, I'm going to try to tie Nivik's thing together, and then we should go to Damascus. I think what Nivik is saying, if we have a totally resonated or totally non-chaotic system, and I apologize if there's any Catholics in the room, because I'm going to use the Catholic orthodoxy as like the example, because they ruled for centuries, and we didn't make any scientific advancements because we had this total agreement of how everything worked, and so we weren't exactly trying to figure it out or theorize anymore. And so adding chaos to that system in the form of the Reformation or war, basically, you kind of get the society we have now, which I think most of us would say is at least better to live in.
Yeah. If you add disinformation, wrong information, you're gonna have negative outcomes as a result of that wrong information. And then
All
you
right,
have
let's
a
get
breakdown of society as a result of that wrong information. And by the breaking down of society, what are you going to do? You're going to not understand why the reason why that you're experiencing. It's like these people who are tolerated in society, they're witches, they're demons. We have to kill them, because you're not coming to a rational conclusion. Of course, you're going to come through your subjective view, and it'll be through a negative viewpoint, because you can't think rationally in a positive way, because you're lacking of knowledge to do that. So you're going to think through your emotions, and your
let's get
emotions.
Damascus in here, Nivik.
One more thing, your emotions would be fearing what and who you don't understand. So you'd more likely approach in a negative view of attacking and break. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I'm sorry, is it finished or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So I feel like the problem that I have with the music analogy, if we could go back to that, would be that the reason why it's bad, and we agree that it's bad, that when somebody plays out of tune, is it changes the experience of the people who are experiencing the concert. So violinist, he starts playing something else, and everyone in the concert hears it, and it's like, you know, experience, because if when he's playing in harmony, that's preferable. Everyone going to the concert has agreed that is preferable to when he doesn't play something, like when he doesn't, play what he's supposed to play, right? So that would only make it immoral insofar as his action of playing something wrong impacts the experience of the people who are aware of what he's doing is wrong. I still don't understand how. Let me give you. You said the hypothetical I gave was ridiculous, so I'll give a more. I'll try to give a more down to earth one. Let's say somebody. Let's say somebody. Okay, let's say somebody has like a record player, one of those like music things, right? There's those like old little gramophone
I have
things.
one of
where you
those.
put the-
One
yeah,
of
yeah, sure.
those.
Okay, let's say somebody has like
I'm
a.
dead. 17, so fun.
Sure, and let's pretend this person's like an old man and he's handicapped or whatever, and he doesn't ever use this thing. He has no idea it even exists in his house, and he he will never use it because he would not notice if it's gone. Now let's say you just go in and steal this thing from him, right? And how has your action has not actually impacted his experience. It hasn't violated the harmony because he hasn't been able to. Nobody experiences the effects of that action except for you, and which is actually a positive because you enjoy having that record player, right? You really enjoy it. So I'm trying to just recast the analogy. So in that case, it would still be. I still feel it doesn't really. The analogy of music doesn't really get you to where you need to be because let's say somebody's playing out of tune, but it doesn't change the experience at all of the people in the concert. That's not really. It's not really wrong for them to do so because everyone who's experiencing and is aware of it is under obviously the music analogy. I'm not speaking like from my own perspective here, but that would still mean that still doesn't condemn it still doesn't really condemn what they did as immoral, if you understand what I'm saying, because it didn't impact the experience of others.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that's
it's
just a slightly
something.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Del.
Yeah, I want to try to take this one. I think something that we're missing in this music analogy is the self-constructing nature of the orchestra, because humans and life in general is allows its own existence. We reproduce, and if we didn't reproduce, we would stop existing. So to a certain degree, like you couldn't have music if you didn't have the orchestra. You couldn't have morality, you couldn't have goodness if you didn't have personhood or humanity or concepts or thought or whatever the thing is. So to me, the reason that the guy who steals this music player or the guy whose instrument is slightly out of tune, but he doesn't really pay, or he doesn't mind and no one else minds because no one notices, I think both of these instances are still bad because the guy who plays out of tune a little bit will then go to teach the next generation of orchestra players a little bit wrong. And so eventually the whole orchestra ends up out of tune.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, Del. But the third person in the stealing context is yourself. Is that you stole in front of yourself and you created the habit of stealing things.
But
you also misunderstand that the person wasn't deprived of property, which in fact he was, and so are his children, because he was going to pass on that record player to his children, who probably would have discovered it and discovered his record collection and learned to enjoy Herbie Hancock, who isn't even reproduced in the time of his great grandchildren.
Yeah, so the problem, I still feel like let me just add to this analogy. Let's say so the problem I think that you have with this analogy, right, is when you steal that record player from the old man, you create certain mindsets in yourself that you inevitably ripple out from you to your children, as these habits are observed by other people. The act of you doing that still disrupts the harmony, because you will go on to do similar things, right? and that
Mhm.
influences your interior state, even though it doesn't immediately harm anyone else, right?
That's
Is
right.
that
Yeah,
the
you set the standard for yourself.
Yes. All right. I
Well-
have to make it a little bit unrealistic here, but let's just say he has like some device that will, I guess, eliminate the memory of the last thing he did, and then so he just steals his camera, puts it in his house,
Like
goes back home, and then just eliminates the memory.
Yeah, just like the thing on the black Man in Black.
Yeah, that
Neuralizer.
thing. So
Yeah,
he deletes the memory
Yeah,
of him
okay.
stealing that thing.
Sure.
How?
From
I
himself.
in
but
this
just
case,
like
I would
he wouldn't be able to ripple out this behavior.
Let's get Scott. He's been trying to. I can hear him.
I'm sorry. I can't. Whoever is talking needs to turn the volume up. I can't.
No, I just saying, please keep, you just get like, go down your hypothetical, like, don't keep like coming back to things, just like you're right in the middle of making your point, and just go through it. Because I know like when like somebody will say something and then you get caught up and you're like reacting to something that somebody else said, just like you're in the middle of making your point, just make your point. Got that hypothetical, you're going with it, just do it. Roll with
I'm
it,
sorry.
buddy. You got it.
Yeah.
You got it.
Yeah, go for it.
Me?
Yeah, just finish your point.
Just
yeah,
quick,
dude.
whoever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just quick. Whoever was starting to talk there. Volumes a little bit low. Is that I think actions people when harming people is the fact that someone who does these actions changes their own personal mindset, which inevitably goes out to others and disrupts the harmony. But I feel like if that could be stopped from happening, and if nobody were to ever know that this happened, and let's say this person just never stole anything again in his life, I don't see under this music analogy how it was still wrong for him to do so.
Well, I would say he's still biologically primed to make that decision. He still has the decision of theft and then erasing his own memories of that so that it doesn't affect. He's mitigating the negative effects that would go out into the world, but he'll still go on to pass those genetics of people that will go to the nth degree to make sure they get just a little bit extra out ahead. And I think
What if he
even
doesn't have
that.
any children?
Right,
What if
so-
he doesn't have any?
So I
What
would
if he doesn't
say
have any children?
So morality is
How would he pass his
morality
genetics on if
is
he
a
doesn't?
choice. Yeah. So let me go in a slightly different tack for you. That I've gone with this stealing thing again, because a lot of people say stealing isn't immoral if it doesn't hurt anything, and you have a choice. Okay, so morality is a choice. If you don't have a choice, it's not a moral question. Okay, if you don't have a choice, it's not a question of morality. There's no agency involved. Like, if someone's holding a gun to your head and says, "Take that old man's record player," you're not immoral for taking it.
Well, maybe.
The person with the gun to your head is the one that's immoral. So
I'm with
but I
Richard.
don't want to argue about that. But when you're talking about stealing, okay, stealing a loaf of bread to feed your children, stealing a record player from an old man that doesn't know that he has the record player. The morality question is about your options. It's not about whether the absolute thing that you did is absolutely going to hurt somebody and benefit someone else or not. The morality question is about your options. You had other options other than to steal the record player. You could have, for example, gone up to the old man and offered to buy it from him.
Right.
You could have gone up to the old man and asked nicely, said, "Hey, I found this record player when I was cleaning your garage for your wife. Would you mind if I took it? Would you mind if I took it? Would you mind? I think it's really interesting. It looks like you haven't used it in years. Would you mind if I took it?"
Yeah.
Well,
Right. You had these,
your garage. Don't
and then your fourth option would be to let the old man keep his record player and just forget about it and say, "Oh, that's neat," and then go buy your own record player off of eBay. So you had at least four options, and the one that you chose was the most coercive of the options, and that's what makes it immoral more than anything else.
But who did it coerce? Who did it?
The option that you chose did not give the person who owned the record player an option to either let you take it or give it to you or sell it to you, etc.
But why was that a bad thing? He's not going to use it anyway.
Yeah, I told you.
So we're talking about the relative well-being of the two people involved in the transaction, right? The transaction that you made with the old man when you stole his record player was not willing on his. It was not a willing transaction on his part. So you can't guarantee. So if you asked him nicely and he gave it to you, then that guarantees that he's okay with you taking it. Right. So in terms of probabilistically, you cannot be 100% sure that he was willing to let you have that record player. So it's not. So it's not a Pareto efficient transaction. You made yourself better off, and you're not sure that you didn't make him worse off.
Yes, right. So you're not sure what harm you did to. Let's say you don't know that he's not going to one day realize, where's my record player, right?
Right, or maybe his grandson was just like really loved that record player and would have been the only memory of his grandfather when he died.
So yes, I admit that.
So you're hurting his grandson.
That's
so you don't know if you asked nice, but if you went up and you asked nice, there were other options that were Pareto efficient that were foregone for when you stole that record player. Right. So that definitely makes it immoral.
That's an issue with the analogy that I thought of. I didn't take I wasn't able to completely consider that, because in this situation, right, you would have no way of knowing that he's not going to, his grandson, be harmed by you taking the record player. But I know I've just been taking a lot of time. I was just at one last point. I think you can still think of analogies in which you would know that what you're doing will not cause any harm, and your action will, even though it's the most, technically it's the worst out of your options in the case of morality that we've agreed upon, like no stealing, right? It would still increase well-being the most, because you become more happier. Sure. And you would be able to, by thinking of analogies, still be able to eliminate the chances of the harm occurring. So
don't twist yourself into not too much about hypotheticals.
Yeah, man.
Go out there, go out in the real world and do good things that aren't going to cause harm to anybody, and they're going to help people.
I hope I'm not going to be stealing any record players, but I just think hopefully it's important to take even things that sound ridiculous or may never happen just into account when we set up something as important as a moral structure for civilization.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's the point of ad absurdum. You go down that road.
And when I think of a better analogy, I'll be sure to let you know.
Yeah. So where the math?
Math, yeah. I mean, I think we beat my music. I think we beat my music analogy to a dead horse. We beat it into a dead horse.
Yeah. Can I bring something?
Well, so I think
hold on. Everybody, please, everybody, just stop. Dal, if this is your show, hit the reset button. You lay out what's going to go on from now.
Maybe we should get some of the people who haven't spoken yet in here too. I think I saw Best of Intentions earlier. I don't know if they're still here, but
one also. What was the main?
Hang on.
The show is maths something and something else.
You guys, Yan LC was trying to speak there, and he's new. So welcome, Yan.
Thanks.
What did you have there?
I just wanted to throw a very quick little thought experiment, try to bring it back to something very cold and maybe more concrete. I wrote it a little bit. You'll recognize me, Pangburn, but I was just wondering what you guys think of this. So imagine, again, a thought experiment, a theoretical supercomputer that can measure the position and momentum, direction, spin, whatever, of every single particle, electromagnetic wave, whatever, in, let's say, the solar system, to be modest.
Yep.
Now, this supercomputer, yes or no, or maybe have a more complicated answer, do you think it would be able to predict to calculate accurately what
Ooh.
humans are going to do.
I've got a really good answer for you for that, actually.
I would love to answer this
Th-
if
th-
someone
this
doesn't.
To Scott in Damascus.
Yep,
Yeah.
this is something I've actually thought about, and I've actually talked to Travis about the same thing as well. So imagine you have this supercomputer that can calculate everything. Do you think there will ever be a point where this supercomputer's calculation it comes to a 50-50 proposition? So if it ever does, it cannot predict the future because it has to make a choice between one side or the other. And that's fundamentally my problem with this idea of like obviously determinism is real, but I don't believe in predeterminism because I don't believe there's even the information available once you get to any point, any state in the universe where you get to a 50-50 proposition. And we could even break that down to like a 49.99999 or a 51.9999, like whatever the difference is. Like you can get really granular with that. I don't think it is ever going to have the ability to predict the future with 100% certainty. I think it'll.
It's a thought experiment.
It's a thought experiment. So assume it does. Assume it does. Just assume it.
No. Well, it's the thought of experiment is that in and of itself is that we have something that can assume this, but we have to take into account the idea of assuming that in the thought experiment in and of itself, right? So that's what I'm saying. So even in this situation, we can only ever get to like points of probability of that. Well, this is like 49.99 or 50.998. Whatever the ratio is, like you're always going to have that interaction. This is basic mathematics. Like you can't get past that even in the hypothetical, even in so like you can offer a hypothetical is like well maybe we're living in a world where 2 + 2 = 5. Like I don't know what we're even doing at that point, right?
Damascus?
Yeah. So this example, this supercomputer, I've thought this is the very tied in with the free will question. This really fucks with your brain if you try to if you try to. Yeah. So it really I get fucked over by this, but it's I am a determinist, so I do believe that such a thing is logically possible, and so this supercomputer would be able to tell the future. It would be able to tell the future to 100% accuracy if it has knowledge of all the scientific
100%
information.
accuracy. It's crazy.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Well,
Could you repeat that?
No,
Somebody
I wanna go
just said.
after. I want to go after you, Damascus. If you want to
I'm gonna
finish
go.
your thought.
I'm just
I'm
like
gonna go too.
internal
I'll go-
monologuing.
Let's let. Oh,
So-
okay, yeah. Let's let Damascus go.
So obviously, physically, there are rules with electricity and how computers work that would render this thing obviously impossible to physically build. Right? You can't because just simply by the way computers work and the processing systems to measure every single Higgs boson in the universe. But logically, I think it's possible, and it would. And what happens is, yes, it would be able to predict everything that happens in the universe until someone looks at the computer and what it's calculating. Because
like
Well-
when you say that just
Now, Scott.
one really quick question. Logically, do you think in that state you might ever get a 50-50 conclusion? Because if you do, you can no longer predict the future. If you
Yeah, Brett. Yeah,
I think-
Scott. Every time it tries to predict the spin of an electron, it's
Well,
a 50-50.
Yes, so yes, that's our current understanding of science, that it's 50-50. But I would say it's still logically we observe it as 50-50, but I'd say there are still reasons why they every specific electron spins a certain way. There are, just because we don't know them, right? So I'm not saying that we know them, but I'm saying that logically there are still reasons why it happened, even if we can't observe it, or may never even be able to observe it because we just simply don't have the instruments for doing so. So I would say that's not actually a 50-50 probability. It's a 50-50 probability because we don't, in the absence of the knowledge that of what is actually determining this. But and we simply observe that electrons distribute themselves 50-50 in terms of their direction of spin. That's our observation.
Well, I'm not even saying direction of spin. Like even if we're going down this fundamental idea of this logic that you're postulating, is like if we look at things in infinity, of course, at some point there will be even with these really precise measurements you have, there will be something that will be so far past the measurements you can make that will be.
I don't even think we need to go there because
we can assume. So again, I think we're making a conflation.
Well, this is the reason why I'm like a determinist, but I don't believe in fate. And this is something I've thought about a shit.
Yeah, I pretty much have the same answer as Lebowski, but I come at it from a different angle because chaos theory exists. So if you have a system that has three or more parts, it basically becomes unpredictably complex to the point you can't predict it any faster than the event would occur. So if you have all the knowledge of everything in the galaxy, that's magnitudes above that level of complexity that you've reached, that maximum level. And so you would never be able to anticipate faster than the system itself evolves, basically.
Exactly.
Right. But
I agree with that.
I think
but also there's another level on top of that, the speed of light being the fastest that a signal can travel.
Yeah, so that's
everything that we look at is in the past.
Right.
We cannot measure the present. It is not possible to measure the present.
Of course.
So everything that you predict with that computer is going to be a prediction of the past.
This is the barrier between physical and logical, right?
This is a great conversation.
Hey guys, I need to bring up the question though to my original question, because all this talk is constrained within the same natural laws that I was talking about in the first place, like the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, Planck's constant, all those things. Yeah, the spin, which isn't actually spin, bring intrinsically, but within the natural restraints of essentially mathematics, we can calculate the exact amount of uncertainty you get. You look at fractals, and we can actually, from chaos, we can calculate order with complete, like actually unknowns. You can bring about the known. But so this chaos and this supposed chaos and supposed uncertainty is within this boundary of the natural universe. And then, so my point, I guess, is just like, okay, so the supercomputer is constrained by a few natural laws, but does that change the fact that despite having to deal with a few uncertainties that might make some calculations incorrect, make it impossible for it to generally be extremely accurate as much as is naturally permitted? And if not, then like, where does this uncertainty come from? Because then you have to make a claim about what that uncertainty is. And this is where a lot of theologians come in and say, well, it's God and whatever. But
I think a mistake that someone made, or I perceived someone to have made, was that someone importantly mentioned the speed of light, right? And so there's literally nothing like we can arrange faster than the speed of light. And that I think that makes a little bit of a conflation between what is scientifically possible and what is logically possible. It is logically possible. They would concede immediately, obviously, that such a supercomputer would never be scientifically feasible. You can't, because due to all sorts of natural laws about the speed of light, electricity, yada yada yada. But still, I think logically, for example, at the most basic level of particle interactions, we could still construct this and be able to determine the future before it happens. For example, if this computer somehow, obviously not by seeing things because light, but somehow got the knowledge of, let's say, a very basic reaction. Let's say in this universe, if you combine two water molecules, you get a gold molecule. And I guess this entire universe was just basically built upon that reaction. So everything was just more complex reactions of that happening. And so concept and logically, this computer would be able to predict everything that ever happens in that universe as soon as it gets a knowledge of one single state. By knowledge of laws and of the particles, it would be able to calculate everything in that universe. So so this theoretical universe, if we try to just draw an analogy between our universe and that theoretical universe, we would have to provide evidence of something that existing in our natural universe that does not adhere to any predictable law, conceivably predictable law. Obviously, we don't know, like what, but say that this does not come from a prior state. This does not logically follow from a prior state, right?
Yeah, well, that actually that answer is actually 42, and I hope you have a towel right now.
Wait, I'm sorry. What?
And we
made
should
a
be
joke.
slightly,
Best
I can't
reference.
hear the response.
we
I
need to
can't.
suitable
Yeah,
music
yeah.
for
I
this.
can't.
So
I'm sorry. There are too many people talking. I can't hear the response.
He never read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
well,
Yeah,
listening
I
to
know.
Frank Zappa playing St. Alfonso's Pancake Breakfast on an out of tune pipe organ that the church can't afford to overhaul.
Wait, I'm sorry. I didn't catch that. Could you repeat that?
We're all much older than you, dude.
Well,
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't hear what was said before.
We're referencing novels from the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
but anyway, so I think Julia wanted to, or was it Dal that wanted to go after Damascus?
Yeah, I think someone said they wanted.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think he already proved my point. I think I was gonna ask, okay, if there was such a computer, how much energy would it take to run it, and is that amount of energy available in the computer's local universe? And how much time would it take for it to gather? How much time would it take for it to gather the information? And could the computer predict far enough in the future to create? Let's just say if you had a problem, like we're in the Milky Way on an arm of the Milky Way. If I wanted to do this prediction to do something useful to make a recommendation to somebody in the Andromeda Galaxy, could I, with this computer, possibly, even if it took all the energy that I took, all the energy out of the star that I'm sitting next to do this calculation, could I gather the information from the Andromeda Galaxy, wait for it to get to me, do the calculation, and then send the information back to the Andromeda Galaxy before the events that I was predicting had already transpired?
Yes.
In the remote corner of the universe.
Yes.
I think the answer to that is definitely no.
Yes.
There's more
that's
to
a
what
scientific.
you than that.
Yeah.
I think the reason. I think it's still the same mistake. That's a scientific reason why this is completely impossible. But because something is scientifically impossible does not mean logically possible.
Damascus, I'm going to give you an olive branch right here, because basically what I want to hear is what do you base your moral philosophical foundation on? Because where we're going down is like we're arguing about like some sci-fi story, and you're arguing about that. Doesn't matter. Like what do you actually base your philosophical and moral foundation on? Like I think that's.
Oh, I can't answer that. I can't answer. I mean, I'll try to give you. That's too broad.
He's still working on it.
Yeah,
that's not broad.
And Scott, before we go there, I'd like to.
I can answer
the computer question too. So let's finish the computer question, and then we can go down the moral foundations rabbit hole.
Yeah. Since we went to music and not actually morals. Sorry.
How does this computer get trained to recognize patterns? You know, you can have a huge amount of highly precise data, and it's totally irrelevant to anything functional.
Look, okay.
That's
Look, guys. I think me and somewhat Damascus are simply more rationalist than empiricist than most people here. Because I'm perfectly willing to grant. Yeah,
You say
because
before the order, Richard.
there's a distinction between empiricism and rationalism. So so empirically, I think it's impossible to make this computer. But I'm perfectly happy to grant Yan Lc's hypothetical because I can conceive of it logically. I don't care that right now we can't empirically make this. So I'm gonna go along with this hypothetical. My problem.
Being rational.
No.
Here, can I wait? I'm sorry. I think I can help.
Well,
Let Richard speak because he's making sense.
Yeah, right.
Well, just like
No, please hold on.
guys,
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interfere. Richard, please go ahead. Finish.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I didn't.
No problem. And so, I think where I run into a problem with this computer is you still have the human being, because I assume how the computer would work is that you would go up to the computer and you would ask it a question about the future. Now, the problem is that imagine how many things actually happen in one moment. There is an infinite amount of things that happen in one moment. So I'm perfectly happy to grant that the computer can know the infinite amount of things that happen moment to moment. But when the human interacts with the computer, he is going to get a severely incomplete picture of what is happening in the moment that he's inquiring about.
When I totally agree with you on that point. I think the when I initially came in and I made the point that like any computer would get to the point where it had a 50% of differentiation, you guys disagreed with me at that point, right?
Yeah, because I was because I would say the computer.
Yeah. Richard and fucking Damascus disagreed with me at that point.
Yeah, because
just because they're disagreeable.
Now you're coming back to agree with that point. That's
well, no, okay, yeah. I don't agree with it in regards to the computer, but I agree with it in regards, in a sense, with the human being, because the human being can't get the full picture that the computer has.
Richard, can I ask a question real quick? Can I ask a question? Supposing that this computer can be built, wouldn't it, Laplace's Demon's computer, wouldn't it already know that what question? Wouldn't it already know that what question the human's going to ask?
It would, yes. It definitely would.
Okay, so yeah.
That's beyond sci-fi. How about something realistic, like stock exchange, algorithmic trading, and high frequency colocation boxes?
What I think
known latency cross exchange data links, where
what I think
is to create rigged systems and be able to predict by manipulating in crooked ways that ought to get entire stock exchanges shut down as criminal scamming operations.
When I do want to say we got symmetry. We got Andy, like Bruce has been in here, like Bruin. I know Bruce got something to say. Bruce, you gotta have something to say.
And
it's going to be hard for me to get a word in edgewise, so I'm listening for now.
I'm interested to see how Yan Lc would reply to my response to his hypothetical. That's what I'm curious about.
Go for it, Bruce.
Or Yan. Or Bruce.
Where to go on this? Where are we at it again? We're all over.
The computer, the computer knows where we're at, but we don't.
I know very all over.
Yeah,
People are
I
having
don't really,
fish
I
at
don't
a
really know.
restaurant at the end of the universe.
Bruce, remember, we're trying to tie mathematics into
Morality.
morality.
Yeah,
And
I mean, I
trying to
don't,
tie
I don't.
computer science in is kind of one thing.
Yeah, I don't really.
It's
I
kind
mean,
of a branch of mathematics.
I think I've weighed in on it already. Maybe not. I just don't. I don't find it. I don't find it useful to use what describes what is to describe what ought. So that's where I. That's where, so I find like math comes out of logic, but it doesn't necessarily make. It doesn't necessarily fulfill the presuppositions that people already hold.
Yeah. So I
the
saw
earth
ENLC on mute when I asked him to respond. So I'd like to hear that if he has something to say.
Yanni?
Okay. Well, I guess I just want to bring it back to a very simple thing, and then I'm going to be out of here soon because got to work and I'm sick. But I just from my point of view, from someone who has a background in physics, I'm actually kind of confused as to what the hesitation is to just recognizing that the human creature is a machine. Because if the human creature is a machine, then you can track morality back in time through an evolutionary psychological process of all sorts of things that physically happen through the input of the senses for billions of years, well, millions of years, hundreds of millions of years. If it's not that, then what is morality? And if it is that, then of course it's mathematics. It
I think
all
it's.
is.
I think it's. I think it's convenient to say that human beings are machines when human beings made machines, and so you're looking at the image made by human beings. The machines are made in the image of humans. So to call a human being a machine is the other way around.
The computer that you're talking about is an image of the human brain that the human put into machine form so that he could make an extension of his own brain.
Well, I wouldn't even say that a computer is nowhere near the level of what a human brain is. I mean, the entire
I agree.
understanding or the entire evolution to where humans are now, it is something in and of itself. Like we have to recognize that humans have developed this ability to
Of course, but
make
it's mechanical,
abstractions
is it not?
yeah, well, yeah,
We obey the laws of nature.
in
We're not
some respects,
biochemical.
It is
Here's
absolutely.
my response.
Hold
to
on.
that.
It is absolutely communicable as well. So
Humans
like
are-
we do recognize like we have communities, and you can be like from the south and like people like potato salad this way, and you can be from the north and like
Oh,
potato.
don't go into the mustard again, Scott. We don't do mustard.
I know this is, but this is the thing. Like this is.
I'm pro mustard.
This is the way the human mind works. Like it's actually it's this organ that has been like evolved for so long. It's so highly in tune to understand its surroundings that we can put these different distinctions on. Like, oh, that's mustard or that's fucking mayonnaise. Potato salads. Like that's how far we've developed, and you know that development that development surpasses scientific understanding because scientific understanding is hard. Like
scientific understanding, perhaps, but it comes from the
really
same
hard.
origin as every other species on Earth. At what point did we break away from the laws of nature and become something beyond?
Oh no, we haven't. We haven't at all. Like we are all the same.
Okay, so then it's math. It has to be.
But here's my problem with thinking of human beings as a machine, because I can perfectly get on board with a hypothetical where we have a computer that can understand human beings as a machine. But the problem is that the only minds in the universe are human, and human minds have constraints. Hold on. And because human minds have constraints, that means that it is possible for human beings to be more complex than the human mind can handle. So therefore, we cannot view human beings as machines because we are too complicated for ourselves to handle. So
Are we too
Well,
hold on, hold on, hold on. Are we too complicated, or is the world around us too complicated? And we're
we ourselves are too complicated for ourselves to understand.
Hold on. You
Oh
do
boy.
not even have to get into like human speciation to like make that argument. You can make that argument about ants and how like
Yes.
ants behave a certain way. So it has nothing to do with like whether we're necessarily human beings. Like and the point you made, it's like the only conscious mind is a human mind. I don't think so. I do think like chimps and bonobos and
Okay, sorry.
dolphins,
That
like
that that doesn't
there is
that doesn't matter.
consciousness.
That doesn't matter to my point. My point was that we are the only ones who can look at something, say that it is mechanical and attempt to understand it in its entirety in a mechanical way. But we are unable to do that.
That's not true.
Yeah, well, that's like the my only point of contention would be saying we're the only ones, is because that's I don't know that's a very
okay that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, it's a very weird way of saying like
that's
we're in the position to do it now. Like maybe in 100,000 years it's the octopuses that
okay,
do it.
that's
like,
fine. But
yeah.
I understand.
Let the man make a poetic point. Let the man make a poetic point. Come on.
Because like I'm trying to communicate to you that objection doesn't matter here because I'm only concerned about human beings.
Anyway, can you please summarize your point again?
My point is that human beings cannot attempt to understand human beings mechanically like Dal-tsu wants to, because our minds are too constrained to understand ourselves mechanically.
I would edit that a little bit to say that a human can't understand himself alone, because you're essentially emergent from a system that is as or more complex than what you are calling yourself as the observer. So a group of people like psychiatrists or therapists or whatever should be able to figure out the goings on in the mind.
Yeah.
Because
you can't pull treacle from a well when you're in it.
Well, but when I hear
that also plays some dirty semantic tricks defining machine to justify the result, as opposed to a more open definition of machine that would be a standard meaning.
Well, let me clarify what I mean.
Yeah, let's get Richard.
Yeah, because when I hear Dal-tsu say we should understand ourselves as machines, what I hear him saying is that it is possible for us to use science to completely predict what human beings will do in every case. I don't think that's possible because the human mind is too constrained. And so we have to rely on other methods. You can call them shortcuts, you can call them heuristics, you can call it the spirit of finesse, as I think Occam did, but it may be someone else. But you can't do it purely mathematically and mechanically.
Can I respond?
Yeah.
Please.
There are things about human beings they understand, and to some degree, if we're going to stand ourselves completely, and where we're going to create a human being like nature would, nature nature, everything is nature. The robot that was created by the human being and what create us of the environment is nature over time. But there are things of humanity that could be understood, because like with the a vaccine for COVID, something like that in a caveman time, of course, you know what I mean, that wouldn't less likely be able to have the potential of doing that. But because there are many minds that can come together,
I'd like to say something about that.
What are you saying? Oh,
Yeah,
we have
Nivik.
well,
have
maybe
people.
like maybe a little clarification of what Nivik was saying. I didn't quite understand the point you're making.
No, he's things about human beings of ourselves that we understand of ourselves. Because like with the vaccine, we understand how our body is, and like in the past, it was beyond us as a caveman to do that. But we have more potential of abundant information that could be processed through machines that have, and many minds that could be of minds networking together in rationalizing things, of millions of perspectives. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah, Nivik.
maybe maybe
talking
try to
cognition,
clarify.
basically.
Yeah, maybe what you're saying is like through technology we can spread out the experience of like human individuals, and like so multiple people can experience the same thing that other people experience. Like
Can I try? Can I give it a shot?
yeah, that's yeah.
Okay, so earlier I brought up statistics. Now, I don't think differential calculus is going to solve our moral questions. I think statistics is the most plausible form of mathematics to solve moral questions, or at least to solve the problems of what are people most likely to do. So, for example, Nivik brought up the COVID thing. Now, I'm not implying any moral judgments upon this, but you can look at Democrat and Republican and how likely they are to get the vaccine if they've gotten it, if they have one dose or not. It breaks strongly along certain lines. Politically, it breaks along racial lines, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I think that was what Nivik's point is. It's very difficult to determine what one individual might do, but if you have a group of people, if you have a state, if you have a group of people that are tied into a certain axiomatic truth, Christians, Hindus, etc., then I think that's where statistics come in play, and I think that's an important point.
I just
Let me clarify myself a little more. You have evolution you have psychological evolution in potential, and where abundant of like how the mind is with people than animals. Human beings with the environment. It uses the amount of information to rationalize it to rationalize with to address a problem where there's more likely of a potential of overcoming the problem, and where like with technology, like with computers, we take in abundant of information,
Well,
and
I
in
just
relation to the
no, hold on.
about it.
Even
I just want to make a point that Zima said. I just want to bounce off that. Like, we can go into discussing the hard problem of consciousness and what its roots are. Is it a computation? Is it a simulation? Is it what? Is it quantum mechanical? Something happening at the base of reality? We can
I'm not
go
talking.
question.
I'm
Say
talking
what?
about the abundance of information. Of potential.
I'm referring to Zima's point.
Yeah.
It overcomes the problem.
Nivek, let
let him talk.
Finish.
I was trying to finish. Okay.
You can rephrase what you were saying, and you can just after I finish. It won't take long. But I think one thing that seems to be missing in this conversation is compassion has to be at the root of all morality, if anything. Like, it doesn't. There are rational ways of thinking about it, but
it's
how we
definitely
to organize it has to do more with compassion, and our ways of experiencing reality aren't always like the most accurate or the most true. They're just like they're meta magical in some sense. If pure truth would look you in the face, you would not feel. If pure mathematical truth would look you in the face, you might not even feel a thing, but we do. And maybe that's just something to ponder over.
When I did want to bring up something that's specifically related to the topic of statistics. Like I don't know if you guys have ever heard this idea of there's three types of lies. There's lies, there's damn lies, and there's statistics. The reason why this is a colloquial term is like people understand like all you have to do is like to get statistics that you want that can show something that you want. All you have to do is ask the right question, right? And
I
this is
work at
this is all.
Statistics Canada, and I can tell you the statistics argument is just forget it. Sorry.
Oh, why no? Like you're probably coming from like a place where like you think it's being done legitimate, but then you look at people like Frank Luntz. And if you don't understand what that guy does, and the entire purpose of everything that he does is he just takes different framings. Like, okay, so I'll take this argument. I'm just going to frame it this way. I'm going to frame it this way. I'm going to frame it this way. And you come up with like 7 different ways to frame an argument on the left and the right. And then he just presents both of those arguments to people. And it comes down
It's called
to
A/B testing.
Exactly. It comes down to the emotional impact. It has nothing to do with like whether the actual statistics of these things pan out the way you actually think what's going on. There are people who spent their entire fucking careers just working on manipulating you based on these
Yeah,
ideas.
that happens.
Yep.
Yeah, that happens a lot in politics. Yeah, absolutely. I was just real quick. I just wanted to say that I just brought up statistics because I don't see personally. I don't know dog shit about math, so therefore I'm exempt from any critiques. So y'all can take that. But 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 I just brought it up because I just don't know of any other mathematical system that is quite as relatable to humans. It just I just don't see binary code or anything like that giving us moral answers. Statistics
I'll trade that.
problematic as they may be, I think maybe they're the best that math has to offer, and that's just
Oh
that's all
no,
I got to
no,
say. But
there's
think
no
that's
moral
okay.
issue. There's no moral
I'd
issues
like to
with
throw another
math.
question.
Like, I mean, that's
I
moral
I think
issues
we're
are a
moving away from
separate
the
thing
problem
from
though.
math.
Like,
Can I say one
like
thing real quick?
you're
Wait,
just
no. Someone had a question. If someone's got a legit question, let's hear it because we're just kind of babbling here.
yeah, we're just talking
Okay.
about statistics. It doesn't relate to the thing anyhow.
Well, I just wanted to bring one last question, and then I probably my last intervention. Um, does the human? So you're probably going to find me annoying. I'm sorry if I'm annoying you. I might be
Talk
repeating
as much as you like, bro. Talk as
No,
much
do
as you
not
like.
do not
It's all
Um,
good.
do
so
that. Yeah, just ask.
it just really simple question. Does the human mind obey and live within the restraints of the laws of nature as we know them? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
If they do, then that's the hard problem of consciousness solved, basically.
No,
No.
it's not. I mean, it's not.
No. I don't think
Okay,
so.
My
and
answer
for
to the
those who are
question is
saying
no.
no, for those who are saying no, what's your evidence to the contrary of this? Because as far as we know, the answer is yes, because
100%.
within, well, actually by definition, because scientifically,
Yeah.
you can only prove things that are scientific. And
Yep.
scientifically, we've proven that the mind is scientific. It obeys the laws of science. So basically, if you're saying no, how are you making that statement without making an assumption about something that is by definition unprovable?
Also, I do want to point out scientifically, we've also proven the way the kidney, like kidney dilutes or like takes toxins out of your body, your brain is an organ in the same way, and that's like what thinks. Like we know this scientifically. It's not like your lungs have That's where your thoughts come from. We know it comes from your brain. We know the parts of the brain. We know how it works. We can
Yep.
keep track of the electricity. We can do all sorts of things. We know everything about that. You know,
Yep.
we don't know the specific fundamentals of what consciousness is, but we're getting there. But we
So,
Yeah.
hey Scott, I have an
we know it
interesting
comes
question
from the
that's sort of
brain.
related
I before you ask the question,
that ties these questions
yeah,
together.
let's say
Do we
something.
know that? Sorry. Do we know that the brain is the origin of thoughts, or can we just track the electrical signals in the brain, which may or may not be an instrument or another sensory organ which detects our thoughts?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I
What,
think
If thoughts are
yeah,
not
it's
something that are part of the
both.
natural universe as you would have
yeah,
described it with physics,
I think
then
the biggest problem with
how do you know the
that,
brain isn't
you have
just
no
something,
evidence,
just
though.
a
You have
sensory
no evidence.
organ
yeah,
that
I,
senses our
I
thoughts
could
from
also say
wherever
that
they're
your
coming
Hey,
thoughts,
from?
you
your
guys,
your
you guys,
thoughts,
hang on,
your thoughts come from
hang
watching
on,
a
hang on,
teapot
Jan,
fit into a
Jan,
fictional
Jan,
planet. You can
Jan,
see that as
Jan,
well.
Jan.
Yeah.
See, you guys, we're not listening to each other to see when each of us are talking over each other. So don't be so keen to get your brilliant point out. Just wait for, a second for there to be some silence and take turns and don't ramble on forever because we got a big room. So just listen to each other, please.
Yeah, and I think I might have been talking because maybe my connection didn't have other people's voices when I was talking.
Fair enough,
So
but
it
it's not
might
just
be my fault.
Yeah, it's not just in that interaction. It's been happening a lot. So let's just take our time. We got lots of time here.
Before Doolittle asked this question, I just had something to add to Big Lebowski's short answer, which was in response to Jan's question, if consciousness was something other than if consciousness was something which didn't exactly obey the laws of nature, if it was something out of the system or something like that. It seems to be a thing which we see in other animals as well, like ants may have it.
But that's the thing. I don't think it's out of the system because we see it with ants. We see it with all these other animals. So we
I
know
was
it's
saying the
within the
thing, Big
system.
Lebowski, before you said that. I was saying I was basically we agree. We both agree on this. Point being that
What's the question?
even the gradient of this thing, like intelligence and consciousness, we like to think that at the very low spectrum is, say, the village idiot, and at the very high spectrum is, say, Albert Einstein. But
Okay.
but they're pretty close to each other, and this apparent gap that we feel from our animals, from the animals which are conscious and intelligent, that gap may also be very small.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And just that's the thing. Like,
I do think it is. I do think that gap is a lot smaller than people think it is.
yeah, and as if there is any definition of consciousness, there isn't a perfect one. It would be that to feel anything is to be conscious, and
Yeah.
then
Like awareness, like any sort of awareness, and like it's been proven that many mammals have awareness of who they are.
no, sometimes people confuse it with self-awareness. Self-awareness is something else. Consciousness is something. You can have consciousness.
No. When I say awareness, it's like that's one of these fundamental ideas of what people consider consciousness is of being like like I say awareness, but I just do mean the fundamental idea of
Mhm.
just being aware of oneself,
Yeah.
not the same idea of like self-awareness. Like
Yeah.
self-awareness has like there's a lot of like I don't know build up uh, baggage in
So
that
is it
in
so
that
hard to think how this thing could have evolved? This phenomena could have evolved like from pain
Oh
and
no.
no,
I
I'm
think
just
that's
asking
absolute.
this.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
I understand. I'm just asking this
yeah,
for everybody who's in the room. It's just
yeah.
like posing a question. Fourth, from pain and from reward, from pleasure and pain. Like, is it hard to understand? Is it like really that hard to understand why this thing could have evolved?
I think
Not in my opinion.
It's
a
no, it's
lot of
not.
research that I've read in at least recently has been thinking that it might have something to do with novel experience. And that's why, like, when you're driving, you're not exactly fully conscious, even though you might feel it in the moment. Afterwards, it's not. But then if you're in a novel, if a bug flies in your face or whatever the novel situation is, suddenly you're totally there and you're like dealing with that situation.
Yeah, or something like error correction, something like that.
Hmm. Yeah,
Something like what?
sounds like Dal's been reading a lot of Terrence McKenna lately.
I actually
Something
try to avoid him.
I think he's Terrence reincarnated. That's my opinion.
He might be.
Yeah.
Well, you see, if you take enough DMT, you can time travel and let's speak to each other's minds. It's my best
Yeah,
impression.
That's not bad. That's not bad.
yeah. I wanted to make a point to what Dal and I'm sorry, I don't know your other name. I'm bad at looking at the names, but anyways, I was reading 12 Rules for Life and today, and Jordan Peterson talks about you want to aim at a target, and your eyes, your senses can only focus on so many things at one time. Like, I'm having this conversation right now, but there are 30 shirts in my closet. There's all this shit on the walls. There's a TV going on in the other room. Yada yada yada. But when I'm talking, when I'm thinking, I am noticing so little of what's going on. It is remarkable. We really overestimate how much we really are perceiving. We're really just perceiving one or two or three things very deeply. Yeah, and I think that's an important point. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, depending on how much you're focusing, like you'll only take in what's quote unquote salient, like those, like you'll hear something like, oh, that means something. Okay, I'm going to listen to that. But at the same time, people can be observant, listen, and take in information.
Scott, is there any way you could get closer to your mic? You're like 2 decibels lower than everybody.
Oh, God damn it.
Scott, you're
So,
loud and clear to me.
Oh, might be me then. Let me check my.
Yeah, it is a bit lower for him, but I can still hear him. For the dude.
It
More
might
like
be
12
your.
decibels. But, there's low here. 2 decibels is barely audible difference.
Well, he looks okay on mine.
Decibels, what, 10 times base 10 log of the relative power level of two signals, and about 3 dB is the least a human can even detect significantly.
Yeah. I mean, well, this is 3 dB is the least people can detect, but 6 dB is half. That's how.
Three
laws
Seth.
work.
Three Seth.
Well, actually, no. 6 dB is a 2-to-1 voltage ratio, but since decibels are defined around power ratios, just over 3 dB is actually a 2-to-1 ratio. 6 is a voltage equivalent 2-to-1 ratio, which is not technically relating decibel.
It's not.
Thanks, Loki.
It's not. But when you're working with audio gear, if you do 60.
There are a lot of idiots working with audio gear relative to the science and engineering standards.
So yeah, you're just keep your microphone 1 fist from your face there, Lebowski. In summary, that's what Rogan says to everybody.
To try to bring the consciousness,
because insects to eat with their hands.
Yeah, so Dal, so the consciousness question that I have is, if you're just as an extension to this question that somebody said, if your brain is not the seat of consciousness, then it's out. Then the seat of consciousness is outside of your brain, and it seems to me that it must be that your brain, if you believe that your consciousness is not a physical, manifestation of your body, if you think your consciousness is something other than that, then your brain, based on the scientific evidence that we have, must be something like an antenna, which is a sensor that communicates with your consciousness rather than being the seat of consciousness itself. And it may sound silly, but there are people that believe that your consciousness resides in the magnetic fields around the earth, or in the woods, or in the middle of the sun.
Yeah,
But philosophically, does it matter if your consciousness is outside your body and your brain is what's detecting it? Does it matter that it's outside your body?
Yeah.
Okay, I just one question to that, and then I'll Dal, please. If that's true, then how do astronauts go to the moon, and how are they conscious?
Well,
I don't know. I mean, like my GPS works.
That wouldn't even matter in that situation. I think what we're getting to is
I think the real question to bring this.
Right.
Hold on. Sorry, I could hardly hear you.
Is where we're going is down the road of panpsychism. Is that?
Yeah, it sounds like we're going that way. But I think the biggest problem with panpsychism, or at least this version of it, where you're like an antenna, would be just the idea that even if that is the case, we shouldn't really posit it till we're at the doorstep of the antenna. Like once we get to the point where we figure out the mechanism and we go, oh, there's not anything generating it, it's an antenna, then we can be like, okay, where the fuck are we?
And we could discover this on the first manned mission to Mars, right?
That would be shitty.
Where like, hey, it's like all the people just like turned off when they got 50,000 trillion miles away.
Well,
that would be ridiculous.
Not necessarily, because then somebody would just argue that the source of that consciousness comes from the center of the galaxy, from the black hole at the center of the galaxy.
No, I mean, like if they did turn off, someone would have to turn off at some distance. That's what I'm saying. To disprove that
at some distance,
be like an inverse square law of consciousness.
I guess
the farther you get from the Earth, the more you act just like a machine that doesn't have morality.
Yeah, so I guess the point I was making is more along the lines of like the way fundamentalist Christians always say, like, well, like the end of the world didn't happen this time, but it's coming. It's good, like 10 years down the road. It's coming, I promise.
No. I think that
giving me money.
If the human brain is not a machine with consciousness being a manifestation of what's happening in our brains, if consciousness is outside of our bodies and it's something that has some phenomenological thing that is related to the Earth's magnetic field or something like that, the farther we get from our natural environment, the more likely we would see people acting as if they were unconscious.
If it was related to like
I think
magnetic field,
yeah.
There are the like Penrose panpsychists though that think that our brain is essentially tapping into some fundamental wave of consciousness that permeates everything.
Everything. Well, that's hard to disprove if it permeates everything.
What did you say? Penrose scientist?
It's not. I should clarify because it's not a Penrose idea. I think he's just trying to argue that our consciousness or our perception is somewhat randomly generated. It has this random element rather than a deterministic element. But a lot of people run with that and they'll use it to like say, consciousness is quantum, so it's a fundamental thing. It's mostly garbage as far as I can tell.
Well, it's not even interesting, which is the funny thing about it. It's like it's far more interesting to have an idea that's like we don't know what's gonna go, what's gonna happen, as opposed to why I have this like presupposed idea that I made up based on this like really weird fucking crystal bullshit that I think. You know, I mean, it's not even interesting.
Yeah, I think we have multiple definitions of consciousness, and
Can
because you
I
can
say,
be unconscious tends to just mean you're asleep. So unless you're saying like it's the like perspective and the ability to make decisions and move and motorize your body, which most people don't say that. Most people say something like you could be a philosophical zombie where you don't have consciousness, you just act like you do. And in
Right.
that scenario, I don't know what we're talking about anymore because to me, consciousness is essentially personhood. It's the stuff that makes you be a person rather than a body on the floor.
Right.
So,
Well,
Dal-tsu, can I say
Well,
what my
consciousness
view
is
is and
just
and get your opinion on it?
yeah, please.
Go ahead, Nate.
robots can,
A level of state of awareness of the mind in relation to reality. So the more you are, the more stimuli connection of the cells that in your brain is the in relation to reality is your level of consciousness. And we're in
how could your brain tell how together it is in relation to
Yeah. I
everything?
mean, the amount of stimuli is not the same thing as the way your brain handles that stimuli. I mean, those are two separate propositions.
it's of the environment. It's aware of the environment.
But that's the thing. Like you said, it was the amount of stimuli. You don't think there might be two different people and they could experience the exact same amount of external stimuli. And one person might like take more out of it than the other person. So that there are things that are immutable to that person. You know.
In relation to the environment,
Not even in relation to the environment. There are things that are immutable about human beings, right? I mean, you recognize that there are some human beings who are better at some things than others. Like there are some human beings who are better
No
at
way, dude.
dunking basketballs or like throwing fucking like Hail Marys or fucking hitting home runs or
like
solving
what?
like
No,
so,
I mean,
everybody must be equal.
there's a
you
difference
have,
there. I mean,
you
yeah,
have your
you recognize that, right?
if you have a perspective and you adapt, you adapt many perspectives of other people's viewpoint. uh you're looking at, you look at something differently than you've looked at before, than just your perspective. So
Yeah,
you're having your
seeing a new perspective is apps. It's one of the best things you can possibly do for yourself. I agree 100%. What does that have to do with immutable characteristics about somebody?
taking in more information. That's more stimuli of consciousness. It's more connections of the brain. It's a higher state of consciousness.
Wait, what?
I thought you were talking about
taking,
immutable characteristics about
taking in more information, you're
somebody's
making more neural
person.
connections. The
Smarter
more
than
neural connections are made in whatever it is you're observing. You're taking you, more deeper understanding, or you having like having more if you take in more perspective of different people's views, you're taking in different information.
When I do want to
You're,
say that Nivek, like you've had your time. Let's throw it out to everybody else now. Let's get everybody else's opinion. Anybody else jump in? What do you got?
No, like no. I think he was like trying to conclude his point. Like, what's your point? Like, you take all this new information from everybody else. What do you do with it? Like, and how does that relate to our conversation?
I'm just
Still,
saying, my brain cells, the higher level, high state of consciousness. That's all I'm saying.
the higher the brain cells, the higher. Okay.
More brain cell connections
Well,
in the head. The more
elephants have.
there's more state of awareness.
elephants have more neural cells than human beings. They're not
Yeah,
this.
the brain of a blue whale is like the weight of a small car or something like that.
And,
The weight of
and
a small car.
listen,
Exactly.
yeah, I don't think it's that big. Uh, exactly that big. I don't know how big a small car is. Anyways,
But our
uh,
brain are or your brain's complicated.
listen
It's,
up. Listen
it's
to me.
like 2,000
Getting about
pounds.
more neural connections. So much of the brain is inhibitory, and there's actually more inhibition going on than excitation. So sometimes, like, if you get a lot of neural connections, then you get something like an epileptic seizure or something like that. So it's really complicated, the architecture of the brain and how it works. And just a simple sentence like that is just not accurate enough. But yeah, what you have described, like more neural
I mean, like
connection,
comparing
basis of
elephant,
Fabian
comparing
learning.
yeah, but you're comparing a human with another human.
What you've described, the more neural connections, forming of neural connection, yeah, that's the basis of Hebbian learning, yeah, for sure. That's how we learn, yeah. And that's happening
Something
all the
interesting. I know we tend to associate brain size to body size ratio with our intelligence. And I'll have to dig up the article. It's in my server somewhere. But I saw the article recently where we found an animal that beats us in brain to body size ratio. And they actually seem to have a language of sorts, kind of like us and dolphins and stuff like that.
Which one? Which one?
Ooh, it was some freshwater river fish in Africa or something like that. Here, I'll find the article and I'll tag you. Tanmay, right?
Yeah. A fish? Damn.
Yeah, it was a fish.
Yeah, I mean, like of course. I mean, you cannot actually think we as human beings are some special snowflake, right? There's nothing special about us. I think we can all agree to that.
That doesn't sit well.
The cortex.
I mean, like we are not some special snowflake that God came down and created and said, "Hey, here you are. You guys are perfect." No, like we're a work in progress. We're a piece of stone still being sculpted.
Yeah, we have a prefrontal cortex that can take in knowledge and process information logically. If we didn't have that,
Yeah.
wouldn't exist. We'd be eaten by that
Oh,
fish you're
yeah.
talking.
Yep. That is a big perspective. Exactly.
Well,
Also,
unfortunately,
fun
this fish
fact,
doesn't have
there,
hands, so I don't think he's gonna.
fun fact, there's evidence that the speed at which animals perceive time is proportional to the size of their brains and bodies. So a
Yeah,
fly perceives time like
exactly.
like the Flash. Not really, but
Yeah.
like 4 times slower than we do.
Well,
Beautiful.
guaranteed, like hummingbirds, like they've got to experience time differently than we do.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Human
the
being.
time the electrons that those neural firings take to travel the size of the brain probably has something to do with it.
Yeah.
But when I read that, I was amazed because some animals, despite having very terrible vision, because they're small, they can see the flickering of a TV at 60 hertz, whereas larger animals with far better vision and processing don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful.
That's because at that point it's less of a problem. Like when you're a smaller animal, like everything's an issue. You gotta be aware. Once you get to be like a dominant, bigger animal, like you have fewer predators. So I think those things just go away after time, right? Just understanding the way things
And you
evolve.
have to look at a lot bigger things that are a lot farther away.
Exactly. Yep.
People live in different reference of time because if you can see things more of outcome predictable outcome, you'd be living in a different view of outcome compared to another that doesn't see it coming. So like a person that can do, like today we can predict the weather storm, so we will be living in a different predictable outcome of what's going to happen than a caveman. They're not going to. They're going to be just living their normal lives, and they're just going to have to deal with being, swept out to sea.
Yeah.
Anyways, so if the human condition is limited to our physical borders, our outer skin, then I would argue we are math, and everything that we produce in our heads is math. You can break it down to math. And if it's beyond your skin, well, then you have to prove it because extraordinary claims, blah blah. And I'll sit here and wait for all the people who said no to prove that
I
they
agree
know
with you.
this.
I think most of us here agree with you. Not all of us, I'm sure, but
we
I
don't
think
even
irregardless, the source of consciousness, I just think, has a lot less to do with I guess the topic at hand that we were supposed to be discussing. So we can go that route if we want, or we could try to talk about something more morality related.
I would suggest that the math model isn't that wonderful because there are too many biochemical processes, and human neurology is essentially electrical biochemistry that have a random element along with an algorithmic or a procedural sequence element, to suggest that the math handles the whole picture very well. It's too much random mixed in with the predictable procedural patterns.
But Loki, when you use math, you're using it to in a predetermined way. Like if you're building something, for example, if you use the wrong numbers, you could have a negative outcome potentially.
Wait, what?
I think
There's a good TED talk done by Luca Turin, who's a French perfumer, who talks about how we came to start understanding rationally, how humans smell or taste things, which took decades longer than getting a similar awareness of how we see light or hear sound. And he explains a bit about the molecular vibrations and random versus predictable elements. But you can look at the same thing in terms of inhibitors or catalysts. And look at say for a good animation that isn't really scientific but depicts better than a lot of science. The scene in the movie What the Bleep, where I could see watching the movie before Candace Pert came on that they were about to start talking about her research in neuropeptides. It's a mix of pseudo algorithmic process and semi random behavior within that. So.
I think to a certain extent it comes down to what kind of math we're using and where, because we do have mathematical systems that are kind of developed to handle randomness. It's just they wouldn't be applicable across all biological systems, and neither would their antithesis. So I think we would need to create a map of mathematical systems that we can then apply to a hyper complex thing like biology or something. But it would just take.
You can do that to some extent with an AI neural network, but there are limits to it because humans are strange machines, in our animal machine nature.
Like we have, I'm sure you've heard of was it Deep Blue or what was it? I don't know, the Deep Fold. That's what it was, where they have basically mapped the folding and the unfolding of proteins and stuff like that.
Yeah, with a high of like 92% or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
With math, we can be more moral. Where with technology, you don't have to kill. You can use non-lethal. Like with an animal, past we'd have to defend and kill an animal, but we could easily tranquilize a lion and because of the capability, and just load them up in.
Just
How about reverting back to a classic example? How about the computer HAL in 2001: A Space Odyssey, trying to manage the humans who are acting outside a proper moral framework? Or more modern, the questions of, would you program military drones to take out our own troops if they're trying to perpetrate war crimes, as is fairly common?
Like, just to come back to what all that we're saying here is, like, what we all are saying here, like, math is just so abstract when you do it. Like, there is no instruction to how one should live life, one should conduct themselves, and the relationship between people, how that should be. Can we all agree to that? Or do you think that something else is going on and math is
In a sense, but then the other side of that is that if you're dealing with public policy issues and diverse society, having consistent standards that aren't responsive to particular individuals outside some level is a way of trying to create a more fair level playing field. But it's very tricky to work out rules for that in a way that don't have serious problems.
Yeah, right. One idea, and I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, was that we create an artificial intelligence which basically learns from our morality, and we continually keep updating it by giving.
Why would you want to use us as models, given how screwed up we are?
That's like a new version of a Bible, right? Instead of having this codex of moral rules, we invent a guy who keeps track of it all for us.
And because his model says so, that makes it better than any judgment we could apply.
Yeah.
We tell the guy what we want.
Yeah, there's no way that could possibly go wrong.
Like, if you look at Google and their constant firing and rehiring of their AI ethics team, and the constant amount of backlash that they'll get, followed by rounds of applause by these guys, and then it reverses 3 months later because the first guy was racist against white people, and the second guy was racist for white people, and now, or whatever their excuse was.
If you look at the old critical legal studies theory going back a few decades, it actually makes a lot of sense in terms of cleaning up some of the bullshit from lawyer dogma, pretending that civil rights don't exist unless every little narrow object is precisely and extensively litigated to the profit of lawyers above people affected. But if you look at the critical race theory and white fragility and offshoots of that, it shows what a bunch of insane monkeys can do, taking an ethical and, logical idea and perverting it badly.
Wait, what's the point? What's the
Well, there are some foundations of ethical or moral society that, when the wrong humans, apply their twist to them, can get perverted so that they become somewhere between insane and malicious.
Yeah, well, right. I mean, our like Dal-tsu raised a very interesting point about bias in such a system, such a network that we train to be moral and just.
Mm-hmm.
We will never be able to refine or eliminate out our biases in a very short period of time, because our sense of morality will also keep changing with time.
Well, how about the bias to put humans above other species versus the religious and cultural traditions, say, with Jains, to try to protect against accidentally killing insects in the course of breathing or walking, or the different versions of sentience and, whether plants or just animals are accounted.
Yeah, or even the questions of free will, I would say. Like, those are also interesting questions. Like, some people
I don't find free will interesting because a lot of it's wrapped up in archaic religious dogma,
Yeah.
which is very disconnected from
Oh,
modern neuroscience.
okay, okay.
And nobody can define free will in a consistent, falsifiable manner. But before starting to argue if does it exist or not,
Right.
and if you can define it reasonably well in a falsifiable form in terms of neuroscience, that would seem to obsolete arguing over the idea of free will because you've moved on to a more functional and realistic model.
I think we should return to the conversation, but I would say this one last thing, that our ethical legal system is based on free will, right?
Um,
Well, I think what we're trying to get at here is that the term free will, how we colloquially understand it, but like each person understands it differently, and they tend to wrap up into it their own religious connotations for what free will entails. When in reality, like
other
we
places,
know what we have, we're just arguing about what we should call it.
in other
No, but
cultures,
the legal system treatment of it, though, and the assumptions of that is another serious fork that actually is an important point. Because, yes, our legal system makes some assumptions about how humans function as the basis for criminal so-called justice that are
right?
largely just not true.
Yeah,
And that
exactly.
really
That's
calls for some major upheaval and rethinking of what we call a justice system.
Free will doesn't exist in religion either because God is all knowing.
That's
So
where it comes from as a concept primarily.
everything is predetermined and out.
Well, no, you have the free will to do exactly as you're predestined. So which is inherently a psychotic paradox.
Do you guys think that this debate can ever be resolved? Will we ever know enough that we can resolve this debate, that mathematics can determine morality? Like this
I think
goes
we
back.
determined it already.
No, I don't think so.
When you with logic of information, you have more of an idea how to approach something in a way that is positive. Um, you you've been ignorance of what and who you don't understand would make you more likely approach things in a negative way in an outcome in where you would have where if you have negative outcome you would lash out and being immoral because it disrupts society will break down and then people who aren't who are you can't things in others that you can't relate to you're going to look at them and other things in a negative way and scapegoat and demonize and lash out at so you're going to have a negative view of who and what you don't understand within society you have immorality in society with a lack of knowledge and reasoning.
Well, I want to say that I think before, like pre-enlightenment, we had religion to guide us in our ethical questions, and now we seem to try to replace it with rationality. But do we have a framework of thinking about ethics? And if we do, is the nature of that framework mathematical? Those last two questions are, I think, what we should really key in on. And for one, I don't think we know enough about those questions to even try to
If your
answer.
rationalization don't align with reality, you're going to have a negative effect with reality. It's going to be
Yeah,
something
but
bad.
I think what he's getting at, Nivik, is that we don't have a formalized, written down system of how to go about discerning good from bad using logic.
You don't use good or bad. You use
We try
gain
so hard
self
to
and well-being of
do
others.
that.
That's what you could.
What we do have is telecom and data-based finance and relatively rapid global travel capacity that have brought together a lot of people and cultures who are used to existing with more isolated and regional systems for handling such things, some of which are rooted in what makes sense for food sources or a climate in a given region, that don't transpose with functionality to different regions, some of which are just arbitrary human cultures. And we don't even have a framework for trying to reconcile all that very well.
Wait, I mean, I think you tried to say a lot. I mean, I don't understand how that is relevant here.
Well, if we supposedly are going to come up with a mathematical or singular logic standards based, moral framework, that requires some kind of basis, for establishing what its standards are. And I don't think humans really have a functional way of doing that.
Yeah,
We have more potential for clashes, and disparities in potential standards than for resolving that in any functional way.
I would think we do. I think we humans
You have to
possess.
observe the environment and taking information of object and trying to get as much understanding of it. So get enough understanding of.
But that doesn't interpret a functional meaning, though, where people differ widely.
Okay, I get what you're saying in meaning, but you do have like a meaning of understanding of learning is meaning, and when you get understanding, you more have an idea how to approach things in a logical way for benefit of
Yeah,
outcome, which creates
what
value.
he's saying, Nivik, is that if you don't have it written down in such a way that everyone can gain an understanding from what you're saying, like mathematically, for instance, then what you're saying doesn't really matter so much because it's hardly interpretable.
Or if you have the same factual basis, different people or groups can come up with different evaluations of what it means or what they think would be a functional or desirable society, for it to exist in.
Yeah, same page of on identifying a fact as a fact, and because in the past people wanted to think subjective in their interpretation through religion, where nobody could be on the same page, everybody interpret things the way they wanted to for their benefit, so you just had constant wars where with the age of reasoning, people were like, okay, we're going to go by fact, in establishing that, and everybody be on the same page, and so like we do things based off of that, and that's where people were going over into republic, fact and logic, rules based governing society, with a democratic of the people, and where
Stop you there because you're going too deep.
Yeah, I think.
No, I'm just saying
I
we
also
just
think.
to reasoning. It's not religion, is all I'm saying. That I'm not,
Yeah, I think it's just you're talking about something that we're not kind of. We're kind of talking about how we could go about creating a logical system to determine this, and you're talking about how like we've removed a veil of ignorance, basically. And I think that that's just a bit beside the point of what we're trying to
we
get
were
to now.
moving away from religion worldview and more science
Yeah,
worldview.
but
That's what I
I would argue
That's what I
you're
said earlier.
replacing.
That's what I said.
Okay.
Until now, until like pre-enlightenment, we had religion, but now we seem to have.
You
Try-
continue to still have religion. You've just decided to change what the axioms mean.
yeah. Yeah, I
Still
think
religious
pretty
belief
much what's
based
happened is
and axioms that are in presuppositions that are not acknowledged. They're just accepted as a tautology that must exist. So you're not away from religion at all. You've just changed it.
yeah.
But even if somebody's religious at that point, wouldn't you have to agree that we're just moving to a better religion? because even the religion that you have right now that anybody has gone through that exact same
It's not. That's
process.
not the issue. The issue
Well,
is whether or not religion
fine.
is an issue at all, not one better than the other. That's the problem.
Then you have to define what religion is for me.
Subjective viewpoint of
Because
people making things up versus
wait
reality.
one sec, Nivik, I'm talking. I don't quite understand what Bruce was saying. I understood the first part, that okay, the axioms that religion held, we've sort of like dismantled them or something. Well, that's what I was saying as well. Like we are trying to use a rationality to answer ethical questions. But how are we changing the axioms, and how are we starting a new religion? I don't understand that part quite yet. How have we not done away with the previous religions? Because I think we're starting to see that already.
What he's saying is that people make up things like
I would like Bruce's
Yeah,
Bruce.
let's get Bruce's.
I'm sorry. The question was how is it not the same, and how is it different, or more specific?
How? Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you can try to strongman my point.
I'm just asking the question. I'm trying to clarify what you mean.
I think it was down the road of like, why is scientific consensus the same thing as religious belief?
Let me
Is that different? Go ahead.
wait. You said that the axioms of religion, we have sort of changed the axioms. I want to know what that means.
Oh, you haven't changed the axioms. You just redefine them with new words. There's still the presuppositions still exist, and they're just redefined. So you must presuppose a number of things in order to make logical leaps, or use induction to make decisions about what ought to be based on the
You'll have to specifically
reality.
as
You have to make a number of axiomatic claims, or you have to acknowledge presuppositions when you start from zero and acknowledge the tautology. Then you change the terms, and in order for you to use induction, avoid induction rather, you must then presuppose axioms. So the only difference there is the terms that are used, not necessarily the fact that they exist.
And to Bruce's
but different terms mean different things a lot of the times.
well, to Bruce's defense, I think to a certain degree that is what we're seeing is we just kind of had a linguistic shift, but we kept a lot of the intellectual stuff. Like we still look at Descartes, for instance. We still look at Aristotle. We still look at Plato. These are all still our main guys. We still have nearly all the same axioms. Generally, the atheists will say we got rid of one, and that would be the god, the like panentheistic god that exists separately from everything. But other than that, we're pretty much, or the atheist worldview, quote unquote, is pretty much the same as the intellectual theistic worldview, quote unquote.
Yeah.
What is the intellectual theistic worldview? Enlighten me.
It just
Well,
says
coming-
there's one more axiom that says God did it.
It depends on which.
Look up Thomas Aquinas's work. It's pretty.
It's just a faith.
Yeah.
It's just a faith in God. And
Probably the
if
top of
somebody
his.
believes in God, like
Thomas Aquinas is a big one. Any sort of like panentheism, a lot of panentheism in, at least because we're Bruce is like a Protestant, so
I'm not. Yeah, but I'm not a panentheist though.
okay. Well, what I'm trying to say is that
even technically a Protestant either. Like I thought
The panentheism isn't theism. Like it's large.
Well, I
They're
heard-
distinct. You know what I mean?
yeah, I
Because
heard
panentheism has the universe as a part of God. Theism has God separate from creation. So there's a distinction between creation and God.
Yeah.
Panentheism panentheism just tries to reconcile the two under the paradigm that we understand.
You will have you will elaborate more on how we I can hear my echo back. How we have just discarded the presupposition of a pantheistic god, but kept all the other things, all the other axioms or something, and was just in terms of that. You would have to like explain what exactly, or give me an example of what exactly you mean by that.
Like
It's like all they did is they got rid of the lawgiver and they kept all the laws.
yeah, everything from the laws of logic were kept all the way to most social laws. Like murder never got legalized all the way to the law of the excluded middle is still there.
Okay.
The
Laws of
only way that I've seen it around otherwise to describe is like absurdity, and that doesn't really hold a lot of water in
I would
making
disagree.
claims about what
Pre-birth
ought to be.
infanticide legal.
wouldn't we agree? Logic
Sammy.
thing.
He's just saying that a religion it could to other things in how people think and how the mind is. It's about how the mind is, and where that type of mindset of seeing one thing as a religion, what another person can do, they still have the same religious mindset, and where it's more about their biases, and they'll just make up something else like a QAnon, and because always go.
Well, what we're really trying to say here, Nivik, is that a lot of the scientific worldview, I won't say all of them, but a lot of the people who adhere to the scientific worldview do the same thing, where they presuppose all of these axioms and they never try to back them up, and then they go about understanding the world through the scientific lens. But what I believe Bruce is pointing out is like we're still telling the same story, we're just using different words.
What
And
story? Which story are we talking about? Are we talking about a particular religious story? Are we talking about
No, I would say that we agree on the same objectives. We agree on the same things of what is good and what is bad. The
Exactly.
morality hasn't really changed, but the mechanism of how we get there has. So we've moved to a much more materialistic view of things. So it's not just don't kill your neighbor because it'll upset Beardman in the sky. It's don't kill your neighbor because maybe he's the one farming the potatoes that are feeding your kids.
It's more
materialistic and from the Enlightenment, in my opinion. Revolution.
It's a little bit of a straw man to the original discussion around why you should or should not do a thing. I understand the vitriolic hate for all things God and religion in this place, so I'm not necessarily surprised. But the idea that people must act a way because God says to do it isn't the only way by which that comes to be understood. And largely that wasn't the case in the earliest of days. That's only been such as it was written later. But what existed as the way people interacted with each other was taken for granted, but then described later. So what you're saying is people
I
shouldn't
agree with you.
people shouldn't do a thing because it might help them in some other way. Doesn't negate the idea from the get-go that God isn't real. It's just that the description of such a thing came later.
I agree with you.
the description of such a
This wasn't about whether God exists, what I was saying. I don't believe in God, but I wasn't saying this to deny God or anything like that. Just to say that I think that our approach has changed. Thousands of years ago, there were different approaches. Approaches have changed, and today, the approach is probably more materialistic. And even religions have slowly adopted more and more materialistic points of view on things, various churches and all of that. But just to wrap around, I think that in the end, because this is cross-cultural to an extent, I think that there's something just very innate to all of this. And I have to come back a little bit to the mathematical thing. Like, we all evolved from the same shit. We all evolved the same mechanisms. It's not very surprising that no matter the religion, no matter the culture, even with science, we discover things that are that appear to be somewhat universal. Like everyone seems to agree that killing someone for no reason is bad. Well, there's a reason to that. You can expand on it with like these great grand narratives and metaphors through like, Abrahamic religions and stuff, but you can also find it through science. You can find it in previous religions and a religious, almost pre-civilizational cultures. So I just think there's just something very innate. None of this is particularly surprising to me.
I can say it's an evolutionary process, and where people are more immoral.
Well, it's very innate, and I can point out something to you that is so innate. Human beings, and even in the chimpanzees, like everybody recognizes it. When a child farts,
I don't
like
quite. I don't.
the parents laugh. I mean, this is something the parents and the child, everybody laughs. Like this is something that is so innate in just the experience of life. How weird is that? Like how fundamental is the fart joke to human existence?
My understanding is the oldest joke ever known was a fart joke. It was found on ancient Sumerian texts, and it was something along the lines of when the wife sits upon the husband's
did
lap,
hear that.
she does not fart, or something like that.
I back that up.
Like how fundamental is that to human experience?
And of course, anybody who's a South Park fan who's watched the Terrence and Phillip jokes,
Yep, exactly.
do some serious research and look back and find that there was a French performance artist who specialized in blowing candles with farts and had a whole persona and stage show and professional reputation based around that.
Dal, do you have anything you want to finish on? Any closing statements? I thought we would. It's come that time to head down to the Tav. Have anything to finish on?
Well, I think whether or not we can find a mathematical solution to morality, we didn't tonight, and I think we might at some point in the future revisit this sort of topic and try to make our own again, because I think we can do it as a group. If we keep trying, I'm not going to do it every Thursday, but like maybe every other Thursday.
Yeah, it's a good exercise. I just want to say thanks so much, Jan, for weighing in. I know you're new here. You're a great pickup for the Discord, so I appreciate your engagement.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Hot day door, pal.
And everyone on YouTube has stopped by or is going to stop by. If you enjoyed the discussion, consider joining us on Discord. We have conversations every day. We are now heading down to the tavern. We do have a Discord tavern. It's called Trav's Tav, and we hang out there almost every night. There will be a conversation going on there every night. So consider coming to join us. It's a great way to be social and engage in discussions about philosophy, art, science, life. We talk about everything. Sometimes we just make each other laugh. That's fun too. But consider joining us. The link is in the description of this video. This has been the Pangburn Hangout with Dal-tsu, and let art and science inspire.